is waiting. Let's get it on. It's all presented. All winter long.
All right. Welcome back to the show, everybody. We have Eddie Wall on the podcast. Absolute legendary boarder, and more than just that, all around good human. And thank you so much for coming on the show, dude. How you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you for having me. I'm stoked to, like we were just saying before we started recording, happy that we were finally able to get this lined up, you know?
Yeah, hyped. What's the summer been looking like for you?
So summer, so I live down near LA, but I live in this little canyon. So I live kind of up in the woods, but we're close to the beach, close to downtown LA. And well, number one, just working, which we can get into that stuff, but also skating a bunch. We skate, I don't know, we try to skate like 2 or 3 times a week. And we're just filming kind of like a fun homie project, which has been going on for, it's supposed to be a 1-year project, and now it's going into the 4th year. COVID played into that a little bit, but yeah, just still skating a ton. And that's, you know, I haven't really surfed a whole lot lately, but yeah, I just find a lot of joy in skating. So
We'll touch base on your work in a second here, but I want to ask you more about this skate, the 4-year skate part for Eddie Wall.
Yeah. Well, you know,
are you trying to get like, what are you trying to film that's going to take 4 years? You know, you're working on the flip back 5.0 or something like that again, or what are you going to hit us with?
Good memory there. No, I mean, it's essentially like a couple of good friends in LA, a couple of kind of older pro skateboarders like Ernie Torres, who's been on Reel forever, Tony Tave, who used to be on Circa and Element and everything, and then my really close friend Chris Barraza, who's just worked in the skate industry a lot, Girl in Chocolate and Numbers, and now he works at Diamond. But we were just going, it's funny, we were just going out and skating parks every Saturday, and then we would do these trips up to San Francisco like just once a year, and we would just go street skating, and we were like, oh, this is so sick. And then we were in San Francisco and we're like, hey, wait a minute, we live in LA. Like, why aren't we street skating in LA every day, you know? And that's, I just grew up street skating, never going to parks. So then we were like, yeah, what are we doing? So about 5 years ago, we just stopped going to skate parks and just skating street. And then we're in the streets and we're skating, and then we're like, oh, why aren't we filming this? So we start filming it, and then all of a sudden it turns into this homie project. And that was in 2018, where we're like, all right, let's film for 1 year and put this thing out. And then it turned into 2 years. And then we were like, okay, we're releasing it for sure in the summer of 2020. Of course, the whole reason we wanted to do this was to have a big premiere, or not a big premiere, but just a premiere for our homies and you know, all party and stuff. And of course we couldn't do that during COVID. So now it's got pushed back another year, and you know, it's just fun. There's no pressure, so it's not a big deal. But GoPro's been hooking us up with some cameras, so shout out to them. But beyond that, we don't have any sponsors for it or anything, which is, you know, a good thing, because we have no pressure.
This is turning into a fully flared project.
Yeah, exactly. Or like a really sorry or something. But I think, yeah, I mean, I'm 40 now, so I still like to try to jump down some stuff here and there and do things. But, you know, obviously I'm not frontside flipping 10 stairs or anything crazy. But, you know, just trying to have fun out there. And I still just get like, you know, so much joy out of skateboarding. So yeah, keeping it.
What's your ender right now? What are you sitting on?
Let's see. Oh, my ender right now is like, it's like a pretty good size. I think it's a 3 flat 3 or 4 flat 4, like double set and a backside 180.
Down the double set?
Yeah. And then I don't know. I have like nothing too crazy. Again,
dude, a 4 flat 4 back 180 at 40 or 39 when you filmed it. That is some serious clout.
Yeah, I think it's a 3 flat 3 before I get too ahead of myself. But but yeah, no, it's again, I just like, you know, I grew up skating, and you know, when we go out into the streets, like I just feel like a little 16-year-old kid every single time again. So it's just so fun. I always come back like so happy and excited, and yeah, so yeah, it's fun. And then the other guys are killing it. We've got like, you know, Tony Tave, he still skates really insane. Ernie Torres, you know, I think he has the most footage out of everybody. He's killing it. Yeah, Chris Barraza, and let's see, we got Jamie County in there. I don't know, bunch of homies. It's fun. Yeah.
Yeah, the friends section I can imagine is going to be pretty stacked too.
Yeah, exactly. We have some good homies in there, so yeah, it's good.
Is Ika gonna have a clip in the friends section?
I need to reach out for him, but he lives like 2.5 hours south, so he's never up in LA skating. Like they skate down south, but I should hit him up for a clip in it.
Yeah, dude, if you were still on DC, he'd be your team manager.
Yeah, right. And dude, he kills it skating. I look at his Instagram and he's doing backside nose blunts and just like front nose blunts and all.
He has good style. He's kind of like has like that timeless, like old school style that translates really well still today.
Yeah, he does.
He's enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, I'm still just like blown away by how good he is. Like even like today, you know.
Yeah, amazing.
Like, my skating has definitely gone way down over the years, but
mine is so bad.
But I still have fun with it.
Yeah, I have a really good time skating more than ever. It's been just cruising around the streets of Victoria, and they're all sloped at a really nice like 10 to 20 degree angle. Yep. So you just zip down one hill and then you can find another one. It's kind of like working yourself down like a maze, and you can kind of find your way all the way down the city without pushing. Right. And so all I do is ollie over like things and then just keep going.
That's so dope.
It's so much fun. Like it's the best time I've probably ever had skating, and I don't have any friends here because I just moved here. So it's just me alone with my headphones zipping around, and I'm like, this is sick.
That is epic.
Yeah. I'm skating an 8.5, which is like pretty big for my feet because I have size 9 feet. So
yeah, that is big. Yeah.
You touched base though that you're doing some work. What's Eddie doing for work these days?
Yeah, so it was a pretty wild ride after snowboarding. And just to kind of sum it up, I basically was like officially done getting paid to snowboard full time in about 2013. And for about 6 months, my wife and I just went and traveled around the world, which was really cool, and went to all these weird, crazy places that we had never been. And then when I got back, I was just doing some commentating and didn't really have much of a plan. And then Transworld came along, and I was able to do Eddie's Wall, which was kind of a web series with those guys. And then we did a couple of we did Mountain Recon, which was a web series with them. And then I was helping them out with their social media. So that was pretty cool, like a kind of transition-ish, you know. And then Transworld went out of business, and I had this very unique opportunity to be a coach for a Chinese Olympic snowboard team.
Cool.
Yeah, and that was very interesting and pretty wild. And I was actually the half pipe coach, which is kind of funny because I didn't ride a ton of half pipe, but when I was young, I rode half pipe a ton, you know. But I did that for a little while, and then coronavirus hit. But just before that, I had Arbor Snowboards reached out to me and asked if I would like to come on as their product manager. And I hadn't had any experience with that exact job title, but I had, during my career, was always very hands-on with designing and helping out with, you know, my pro model boards or outerwear, gloves, everything like that. So it was a kind of a natural fit. And so that is currently what I'm doing. I essentially started the job just before the lockdown, like COVID hit, really. I started March 2nd of 2020. And so, my first day in the office, I like go into the office and I'm like, oh, okay, I have a real job now. I'm in an office. And then the next day they're like, oh, you're working from home. And I was like, oh, all right. So it's been about 1.5 years of working with them. And it's just been super interesting, and this whole other side of snowboarding that I had never been a part of in a bigger way. And it's just been incredible.
You're seeing how the engine actually moves. and it's a different perspective. It must be pretty eye-opening going from the complete rider driven side for your entire amazing snowboard career to moving into more like this transition on the business side and seeing that engine move. You're like, oh shit, this is what actually sells product or whatever.
No, you're spot on. It is so interesting because, I always had this perspective during my career. I was like, I want to be the biggest snowboard nerd. I want to know everything there is to know about snowboarding. But I was only thinking of like tricks, riding, athletes, locations, contests, just sponsorship, this whole side.
Totally.
And in my mind, that was kind of like the only thing there was in snowboarding was the physical riding of it. And that then when this door opened, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like a whole other massive, if not way, way bigger part of snowboarding that I had only just barely glimpsed into during my career. And I mean, right now, with being a product manager, essentially what that means for anyone who doesn't know is I oversee the entire snowboard line and the binding line for Arbor, and essentially like help come up with new boards to make, talk with the athletes, think about, hey, what should we change, this and that. But there's a lot of moving parts because you have to talk with, sales to see what sales is doing. You have to talk with marketing. You have to talk with, Bob Carlson, who's the founder of the company. And you kind of have your hands in everything in order to create this snowboard line. And then, I mean, that's again, the tip of the iceberg, because then once you start designing the board, you have to work with the engineer who's actually designing the boards and the shapes, the factories who are dealing with the build of materials and all the different components that go into building the actual snowboard. You have to work with the art department to design the artwork that's going to go on the board and how it's going to be. It's just, dude, it's unbelievable. And it's kind of neat. It just gives me a whole other way to be obsessed with snowboarding.
You have to piece together all the different departments' visions to meet like one thing that's actually going to sell product. And to do that, you're the perfect candidate for that, because you can see everything. You're not biased to one side. You know what I mean? Yeah. Where I think that you kind of need somebody who's been in the game long enough that they can communicate with the riders and stuff, but also can communicate with the team manager properly, but also is working towards the benefit of the company, which is ultimately selling boards. So yeah, I think that they've picked the right guy for the job.
Yeah, well, no, thank you.
That's sick, Eddie.
And yeah, I mean, it was, I really have to give a shout out to, my, I have basically I have my boss, who's Charlie Merman. He actually works up in Seattle. And then Bob Carlson, who's the founder of Arbor, for essentially kind of going out on a limb, because I had never done this exact job, and in a way taking a chance that I would take it responsibly and do the work. And I think it's worked out, and I found a good place. And it's just really cool too, because just learning more about Arbor from the inside perspective is very cool, because we all get locked into the certain things that we like to do and the certain brands that we ride and everything. And now knowing what Arbor, how it was founded, what it represents, their entire eco story, their environmental story, and just the fact that, honestly, I mean, the fact that, they signed Brian Iguchi and they still have Frank April on the team, like they really do, they actually follow the like, hey, this is a family type of a community. A lot of companies will bring you in and like, you're family, and then in 2 years they're like, your contract's up, see you later,
Yeah.
And I feel like Arbor is a little bit more actually kind of stands behind their word. And yeah, and just seeing, I mean, to be honest, like working for a snowboard company that's still run by the founder, who is a snowboarder, is pretty rare these days. There's not a ton of companies out, snowboard brands, that are still a little like run by the founder, and
yeah,
and someone who just snowboards, still snowboards. There's so many companies out there who have, who are run by people who are kind of have their finger off the pulse,
Oh yeah, they're wearing suits and stuff like that, and they show up, and then they they sign a few things and then they go, okay, we can cut back on this. They're like, who's Jody Wozniak? Let me look at his Instagram, get rid of him, get rid of that. They don't understand. So it's nice to work for a company that you respect, and it also brings a lot of respect to the company when you're hiring from the snowboard community, which I personally like to see. Like, for example, Arbor could have hired maybe someone who just came out of a business school in any number of the states and been like, well, his credentials are better for our, but to hire a real snowboarder and that, like yourself, who's driven and wants to learn, to me, that's what snowboarding is. You're keeping the snowboarding community going. You still have to hire the right person for the job, but those people tend to still be in snowboarding, and to keep those jobs in snowboarding, just, you know, that's awesome. Good for Arbor to keep that wheel spinning, because that shit's important, man.
I couldn't agree with you more. And the fact that, again, there's a lot of companies who just kind of talk the talk but don't walk the walk. And you know, even, yeah, a lot of companies, even when you're on the team, they're like, oh, when you're done riding, like, we're gonna find a great job for you in the company. And that almost never happens. Literally
Heard that one before.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's like insane how many times that's said. And then when your contracts are up, they're like, oh, see you later. No phone call, no email ever again. And so I do think it's really cool that Arbor has, even them. I mean, as soon as they brought Brian and Gucci on, I was just like, oh my gosh, you know, Gooch he was up in Jackson, still riding really hard, didn't have any sponsors. And he was a sushi chef. And Arbor was like, you know what, like, that, you know, he needs to be out there snowboarding full time, and just brought him on. And that instantly gave me a huge amount of respect for Arbor, more than I already had. And then they brought Dave Marks on as their marketing manager, and Dave Marks is like ripping snowboarder, amazing human, like super part of the snowboard community, you know, and then bringing me in as well. I think they are on a very cool trajectory. And again, just to bring up the environmental stuff again, now all these companies are like, oh, we're green and we're doing this and we're using bioresins and we're using sustainable cores. And, you know, it's just funny that, you know, Arbor's been doing that since 1995. And now that's like cool and trendy. And Arbor's like, dang, like, if this is cool and trendy, then we've been doing this, and we've been doing this forever, you know? So it's just interesting to see, and the fact that they're still around, you know, think about how many companies are no longer there, and Arbor has like kind of stood the test of time. And I do think it's just because they're in it for the passion for snowboarding, and that's it, you know? So, yeah, it's been a very eye-opening, you know, year and a half.
Rad. Really cool to hear. Yeah, there's about keeping those like nostalgic greats around. I think that it used to be like a pat on the back, but now I almost think like, not only is it sick, it's also really good marketing, and it's really good for the brand, and it's really good for young kids. And let's face it, like, I feel like a lot of kids who devote their life to snowboarding, in some aspect, I guess, put a lot of energy and time into snowboarding, maybe to get away from exterior problems and emotions and stuff. And to have people who've devoted their life to snowboarding as being a mentor, you know, like if you're a young kid and you get to go hike in the mountains with Gucci, or Jamie Lynn on Vans, or Pat Moore on K2, or whoever, like, you keep those people around, it's like, it just breeds a really healthy team. And like those older people that are legitimate mentors, that, like, you know, you can't have the 40-year-old skid who's partying and doing blow and getting young kids to sabotage their lives. But like, if you have those older mentors in your company, I think it just kind of like makes the company a lot more strong, and more than one way that you can just see it from a business side and being like, well, our numbers are showing. It's like, you can't, there's no numbers projected to it. It's just like the company and the feeling, and I just think that it helps in a lot of avenues that you can't really maybe pinpoint. But it's really rad to keep those older guys that have been in the community forever, and it gives them purpose too. It's like, you're people who've devoted their entire lives to snowboarding for 15, 20, 30 years. It's like, man, they love it too. And it's like, to keep those people around when there are those community events like premieres and stuff like that, it just makes the whole community doper. It's just, to me, that's like so important, from whether you're hiring judges for the X Games or whatever, to keep snowboarding within snowboarding. We don't need to hire so many things from exterior. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you're saying that, and I couldn't agree more. And I think you see that in surfing, and I think one of the reasons you see that in surfing is because surfing is relatively low impact compared to skating and snowboarding. So you can still continue to be, as long as you're motivated, as you get into your 30s and even 40s, you can still continue a pretty decent surf career. If, you know, I mean, look at Kelly Slater. I mean, obviously he's like an anomaly, but there's a lot of older professional surfers who, and I think surfing in general also has this respect your elders type of a view. And I also think skateboarding has that, maybe even more. Skateboarding has such a respect your elders type of mentality. And I love that, because again, you know, when you're a young kid coming up in these sports, like, you know, Kevin Jones is someone who really just like put me into place right when I got in. He was like, this is how it is. This is how it is. You know, like we'd film in the backcountry and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm exhausted. And he's like, oh, really? You're exhausted? Oh, how long have you been doing this? Oh, 6 months. Like, wait till this is your 12th season of filming, or, you know, and I'm like, oh man, like, yeah, you know, I should shut up, you know? And, you know, we need these older legends to give their perspective, or otherwise it's like anything, you'll lose that history. And then it's like, where, you know, it's just, where are you going to be at? And I mean, dude, look at like Vans just signed Andrew Reynolds. How cool is that? You know, and
so sick.
And I mean, you know, Steve Caballero is still on Vans. You have Lance Mountain is on Flip. You have all of these guys who are still, I mean, again, these are some of the anomalies. Like Tony Hawk's still killing it. You know, it's, whereas in snowboarding, and I think there's a couple reasons, but there's always been this real quick turnaround, shorter careers. I'll give you one example of why I think that is, but you know, it's shorter careers, and it's like, there's a lot less loyalty. And I think a lot of companies are going in, you know, they're like, oh, you're 29, like maybe even younger. Later, there's a 16-year-old kid who did a double cork. Let's get him, you know? And it's just like, man, that's just sad. And I think we're slowly starting to realize, again, like you kind of brought up someone like Pat Moore, who is kind of still relevant in snowboarding as he's getting older, but he's still killing it. And the companies are keeping him on, which is awesome. And again, Arbor, you know, Frank April still on the team, Mark Carter, Brian Iguchi, Marie Francois, kind of keeping some of these relevant names around for that exact reason, to just kind of help the younger generation, you know?
Yeah. And those relevant names that reflect the brand's overall like vision, you know what I mean? Like, it makes sense to like trim the fat if you have somebody who no longer fits your vision. But someone like you mentioned, Mary France Roy there, like she meets the criteria through and through for someone to be on Arbor. Like, she loves nature. She's passionate about the environment. She loves snowboarding with her soul, like such a good fit. Where, you know, I thought, and I had Todd Richards on the podcast, and I thought that he articulated this really well, or confirmed my stance on it, is when like DC let Devin Walsh go. I thought they really dropped the ball on that one. And I think because just Devin, DC, that was like, I don't know. To me, I was like, really like, damn, like, I mean, even you could throw you in that same mix. But I mean, I guess I'm just bringing it to like a lot of brands, when Devin got let go, had already started picking up the like, let's keep our older pros around that have helped us get to where we are, that still fit what we're about. And Devin Walsh, being a snowboarder and skateboarder through and through, I thought that he really could have fit that mentor, older kind of sensei look for DC. And so when they let him go, I was like, that kind of like, I don't think they needed to pay him a lot of money, but for Devin to show up at like a DC demo, I think that brings, and the way he talks to younger kids and stuff, I just think that it helps the community in so many ways. So I was a little disappointed for them for doing that, but I mean, it is what it is. I'm sure Ika didn't, either want to do that or had to do that. Hopefully Ika didn't have to cut Devin.
Yeah. And there's no way he would have wanted to do that. I mean, Devin's like one of his closest friends and mentors and filmed with him all his life. But I can say from working on this side of it, I mean, obviously money and budgets and everything do come into play. And it's interesting to see the behind the scenes side of it. But at the same time, I fully agree with, the fact that we should take into consideration, like, respect and, respect the elders a little more. And it's funny again, because if you flip through a skate mag, you'll see like all of these old names and stuff. And it's pretty rare to flip through a snowboard mag. You have Terrier, you have Jamie Lynn, who's, still with Mervin, and, Gooch, but you really don't have a whole lot of older names being thrown into the mix, and but again, it's all circumstantial. It's like
Exactly.
if Forum was around, Peter would probably still be listed on the team.
Yeah.
If there were certain things, and also one difference between skating and surfing and snowboarding, which I've kind of seen over the years, is with skating and surfing, there isn't necessarily seasons. I mean, you can always go somewhere to find waves, and you can always go somewhere to skate. So what that does is it helps you like spread out your time on the board, right? So say a pro skater is filming for a video part. First of all, there's like almost never a skate video that comes out and you have 12 months to film, let alone 6 months. Like when I moved down south and I started becoming friends with some skaters, when I told them that I filmed a video part every year within a 6 to 7 month period, they were like blown away. They were like, dude, we get like 2 or 3 years and we can film 12 months a year, and I think that's one reason there's a higher burnout rate in snowboarding, because we have to, like, for those 6 months, it's like, go. Like, you have to try to film. If you're trying to get a 2-3 minute video part or more, you have to like kill yourself for 6 months nonstop. And I wake up and lace up the boots, even if you don't want to. And then it's like really intense and then nothing, and then really intense and then nothing for the summers. Whereas skating and surfing are just real spread out, even. Like, you could go film on a film trip for a week, chill, go film a day, chill a day. It's like it's more like staying on the line rather than like snowboarding that's like, all out crazy and then like nothing, all out crazy, nothing, So I think that is one reason that by the end of the season, a lot of pros are just like, oh my gosh, I don't want to see a snowboard for 6 months. And as you get older, that feeling can just be like, I'm done,
Totally. And it's hard. Not so much, well, yeah, maybe surfing too, but finding new spots, snowboarding, if you're only given a 6 month time slot. I think that one thing about snowboarding that a lot of people talk shit on is, oh, they go back to the same spots. But how do you not go back to the same spot when you have, if you're a backcountry snowboarder, a 3 to 4 month window, and with our weather inconsistencies, sometimes more like 2 months. And so you're just going to sled by a guarantee clip that the landing works, that jump is there.
Yep.
And the snow is good on that face or that aspect. And you're like, okay, like, we're going to either sled by this and try to find something else in Whistler, especially with the circumstances around COVID, not letting you like travel and stuff.
Yep.
It's like, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going to hit that same pillow popper, but like, I need to have a part and a clip. Hopefully we can get creative with the angle, but it's hard to allow yourself to get really creative unless you have the eye, the vision, the filmer, the weather, and the budget to do it. I look at someone like Lewif, who's amazing at traveling the world and finding new creative spots, and has an amazing filmer, Hayden, to work with, who wants to do that and embark on those journeys, or had an amazing filmer first time on Adidas. But if you're just a kid who lives in, Salt Lake City, you're like, I'm sorry, but I'm going to the rail gardens. Like,
yeah.
I'm going there. It's still snowboarding. It's still a good time. And hopefully it's hard to find a new creative spot. And unless you like, yeah. And it's really exciting in snowboarding when you do find a new creative spot, because everybody's so drawn into it. Like, where is that? And it's really special. But when you only have a 6-month period and you're on a contract and you get older and you have more obligations than just getting stoned and sleeping on a couch.
Yeah.
You know, and you have a girlfriend who's at home and you're thinking, okay, this could be over in 3 years. I've seen my friends get dropped immediately and then they have nothing. So I have to save up some money. And so there's a lot of elements that goes into like finding and being able to create an amazing video part.
Yeah. And I think you're spot on with the finding spots in the backcountry. I mean, first of all, in order to get, I mean, there's so many elements that come into it, but yeah, I mean, you know, when it's a sunny day in Whistler, like you said, you're not scoping. You're not out like, let's go find a jump. Like, no, like it's 5 a.m. You're in the parking lot and you're like, we need to be productive as possible and maybe hit 3 jumps today. And like, there's no like, let's wander around. And then the day, and people are like, oh, well, why don't you scope when it's not sunny? Well, when it's flat light and puking snow, you can't see anything, and you're out in the backcountry, like you can't even see any peaks around you. So I think anyone who either anyone who might say something like that, like, oh, why don't you go to new jumps, or why don't you do this? I would be very curious to hear how much time they have spent in the backcountry filming a video part, because it's so different, and backcountry especially. I mean, finding unique street spots is quite a bit easier, and that was one thing that drew me towards the streets, is because I was like, oh, I can kind of like come up with new, cool, weird stuff, and that always was interesting to me. Like, but in the backcountry, especially because of the level of riding, like if you have to hit a 70-80 foot backcountry jump, I mean, there are not, you look in the Whistler backcountry and you just see rollers and you're like, oh, this is amazing. But when you really get into it, to find a perfect run in, a perfect place to build a wedge or a drop or pat down, and then a 70 to 80 foot, and then a perfect landing, that is not an easy thing to find. And I think, again, that goes back to your point of like, well, of course we're going to go to the same jumps. Of course we're going to go to the Forum step down, or of course we're going to go to perfect jump, or of course we're going to go to Hollywood Cliffs or whatever, because it's like these features are not easy to find, right? And anyone who thinks they are, again, I'd be like, okay, how many parts have you filmed in Whistler? Guessing none, because you would have never said something like that if you had been in the backcountry. You know?
No, it's like I've been out there for a while now, and I mean, our crew is really like, we do spend time on those days that do allow us to go search. Like, you know, if it's a sunny day and we all get clips and then we only have like an hour window, we don't have enough time to hit a step down, build a jump. Okay, let's go do some recon. And especially filming with people like Rasman, the whole crew, actually, everyone in the Man Boys, and Aaron Leyland, who was our filmer this year for the King Snow movie, everyone's pretty gung-ho to like find new spots. And we all are, because they're exciting when we find them. But I mean, I would say 8 times out of 10, you know, you end up zipping over the other valley and it's like, bump, 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 bump. Like, you're like, oh, there's nothing here. Or like, unless you're like Jeremy Jones, like, and then going that extra distance also adds that extra element of like the unknown too. You know what I mean? You're like, okay, if we zip over this ridge, like, I think we can come back up here, but like, is it too steep? Like, are we gonna be able to get back out? Clouds are rolling in. So there's a lot of elements into like just finding a new zone. Yeah. And I think Devin Walsh, DCP, Roman, Mikey and Devin, that crew for Whistler, like, I have so much respect for those dudes being able to map out the Whistler, Pemberton, Squamish backcountry.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, like to go much further than where we're going right now is like, to the next generation, like, good luck. Like, yeah, maybe they'll have hover sleds, but like, we have the best sleds that go so fast and can get us anywhere, but you only have so much time in a day to be productive and safe. So yeah.
No, I think that's another thing people don't realize. Like, being out in the backcountry is no joke, and you get used to it just like anything. But people, like you said, I mean, there are so many factors that come in, and not even just, you know, avalanches and things like that, but again, like going really, really far out to the point to where you're like, okay, we're hours from the parking lot, and we're about to go down into this sketchy thing, and can we get back out of it? And what if we do get down in there and then someone's sleds breaks, or whatever. I mean, we had a time in Whistler once where Yoni's sled broke way out. I think maybe might have been in either Callahan or Brandywine. I mix up the spots now, but like we were so far out, and I mean, we had other sled crews come, and like they were helping us tow the sled, because we had some like real crazy hill climbs to do to get out of it, and we had, I think it was like 2 or 3 sleds with ropes all going to his sled to get it up over, and it was just such a nightmare. And then we're out there, we were sledding out in the pitch black, and that's really sketchy, especially like you said, clouds come in, you get socked in, it starts snowing. I mean, it's not it's not out of the question that you can get stuck out there and stuff like that. So it's the backcountry is a whole other beast. I had fun, and it's funny because my career, I was very much known for the street riding and even park riding for like DC Mountain Labs and stuff. But every season I would start with 2 months of rails, like basically January, February was rails, March and April was powder, and then April, May, and then the spring was park jumps. But like every year I'd probably spend at least 2 months, 3 months in the backcountry. And I mean, it's just so brutal to try to get tricks in the backcountry. And that's again why I liked rails, because I was just like, man, I can get 3 clips in a day, 4 clips in a day. And in the backcountry, you're like, sweet, I got 3 clips in February. And so I just I have a crazy amount of respect for backcountry riders, and what you have to go through to get full parts.
No, I'm psyched that you brought that up and shined some light on how hard it is to get backcountry clips, because just being out there the last like couple years, or 5, 6, 7, 8 years now, I kind of getting lost how long I've been out there, but it is wild to see people film a full part and knowing what went into that video part. Like, to get 20 backcountry clips that are like fresh snow, deep, you're in the air, good style, decent lighting, because at one point, who cares about the lighting? You're just happy to get a clip. As you mentioned, 3 shots in February. That is very common to get like 1 or 2 clips in January, a clip in February, and then we call it Magic March because a lot of people film their entire video parts in March because the days are longer, you have more light and typically more sun. But our big thing that we've been dealing with the last 5 years is wind. So a lot of the days you go up there, it's windy, everything's screwed. Where you talk to the vets like Devin, they're like, we didn't really deal with that much wind. We had lots of deep snow, good bondage. And you look in those old forum videos and it's just right there in front of your face. You're like the deepest pillows. And they couldn't even go far on the sleds, but you could see in the landing how deep the snow is. A guy like Devin would disappear probably regardless, just because short little Dev. But shit, there's a lot of work that goes into this. Same with rails. It's just like respect all around. But like you said, if you're a really talented rail rider, you're somebody like yourself in the heyday, or you move forward and someone like Jay Kuzik or Jed, or a little bit more new, you get like the Tommy Gesme and stuff like that. Like those kids that are good, if they have a good rail, they're getting clips. You know what I mean? Yeah. Where if you're a good backcountry snowboarder and you're really good at it, you could still find nothing and go home with nothing.
Yeah. And I think there's so many ways that, okay, first of all, with the handrail, you can try a, front 180 switch press 100 times. You can try it as long as you don't get kicked out and you have the energy. You can try a cab 270 40 times, right? And I think a lot of people don't realize that too. Hitting a good, like a big backcountry jump, and if you're with like a couple dudes, 4 tries maybe until the landing is bomb hold out. And like Kevin Jones always said with backcountry jumps, he's like, you probably get maybe 4 or 5 tries for a trick, and again, it depends how many people are hitting it. But once those landings get destroyed, a couple ragdolls, a couple bomb holes, like that's just the danger zone, right? And if you can't like drift left or right on them, you're landing in a real sketchy area. So, I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, okay, a backcountry day too, especially in Tahoe. I mean, Whistler, you get a little bit, I feel like you get to sleep in slightly more, but like in Tahoe to get the good light, I mean, you're usually alarm is set for 4:30 in the morning. You're jumping in your truck at 5. You're at the drop zone at 6 a.m. and maybe even earlier. And then the sledding's a lot easier in Tahoe, but still, like, I mean, say in Whistler, you're sled like an hour. By the time you get out there, people don't understand, especially if you're cutting tracks. I mean, you're like exhausted by the time you even get to the thing. And then when you get there, you have to shovel for like, if you're building a wedge, you have to shovel blocks for like 4 hours. And then it's like, and then you're like, you've got like only a few hours of sleep. You're exhausted from sledding and breaking trail. And then you have to do physical manual labor for 4 or 5 hours. And then you're like, oh, okay, now perform a trick that is like extremely difficult that only a few people in the world can do, and do it in 5 tries. Like that to me sums up backcountry snowboarding, you know? And then you could do all that and then you ragdoll down the landing, which people are like, oh, it's powder. Yeah, right. It's like getting in a car accident every single time you fall because you're flipping down this hill. And like, and then, I mean, dude, there's days in the backcountry, like if I didn't get a shot, like I would just pretty much want to break down and cry, you know, like, because you're so exhausted. And then I remember like a couple of times filming with Forum, like, you know, like probably in March when you might get a couple days of sun. I mean, if you get like 3 or 4 days straight in the backcountry or 5, but on that like 4th day, you're like a zombie in the parking lot. You're just like loading up your sled. And then like, if you get the whoops on the way back and you just like, I can't feel your forearms. You're just like, oh my God. Like, it's so crazy. Like, I remember one time in Whistler, it was like perfectly bluebird skies and everyone made the call and everyone was just like, no one can ride today. We're physically too tired to go into the backcountry. And like, it was, I remember we were all sitting there like on the couch, like, I cannot believe we're not out there. And we're like, but we would just get injured, you know? So yeah, the backcountry is a whole other beast that, again, I don't think anyone can fully wrap their head around until they've actually done it, you know?
No. And it's funny sometimes when I think team managers and people who haven't done that before or haven't done it as of late, like if you're a team manager who did it like in the 90s, like you go sledding, you get to the lot, you don't have to go far. But like now our days, it's a 15, 16 hour day a lot of times. Like we're out of the house at 6 and I get home sometimes at, like I was staying at my good friend Rube Goldberg's house.
Yeah,
best snowboarder in the world, my hero, Rube. I was staying at his house and he was like, oh my God, I forgot how psycho this is. Like I would leave at 6, I'd get home at like 10 p.m. He would leave like a plate of food I would shovel it and then just pass out with like half my gear on, get up at 2 a.m, realize that I have to go to the washroom, didn't take a shower. All my gear is not getting dried out. And it's like day 4. You can't even think, you know, your mom's texting you like, you haven't called me in a month. You're like, I don't know what's going on right now, but it's, I'm not saying it's a bad time. I really enjoy it. But this year I didn't film any rails and I really missed the way of like, you have a group of friends or new friends and you're in this RV and you're driving around, you're looking for spots. There's jokes, there's people's music going on. It's like, you get to know everybody. And it's like I really enjoy the dynamic and rail. I like the yin and yang.
Yeah.
Like you, I feel like the way you did your career, you did a little bit of everything. I also think that really helped with like your career. Like you did, you know, from rail contests to X Games to backcountry to hips, quarter pipes. I mean, like your promo copy intro, you kind of go through like you just ride everything. And I think that the all-around rider was the formula back then to be a top tier rider. It was like, you need to ride everything. I feel like anyone who's just, well, minus like JP and Jeremy, but most people who are in the early 2000s just doing rails, you know, I don't think it worked out as well as the people who could do both.
Yeah. And I think that also has to do with,
And they could, sorry, I want to just interrupt there for 1 second. I said JP and Jeremy just only doing rails. Obviously, they were both amazing jumpers, but
Right.
their focus had always been a little bit more like street focused.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think, you know, that also, well, I mean, I always grew up wanting to just be a really diverse rider, and have video parts. Like I always made a conscious effort. Like I want my video part to have backcountry, street rails, and park shoots, you know, because I also, and even, I mean, man, one of my very first ads for K2 was a pipe shot, you know, it was an air to fakie and then an ollie backside rodeo in the pipe, you know. So I always, and I think also coming up with Kevin Jones or having him kind of mentor me was a huge part of that, because Kevin was like, I mean, he was the threat of everything, you know. The dude got Rider of the Year like a couple of years in a row. He filmed for multiple years. He filmed a part for Mac Dog and for Standard, both, and like would get ending part in both and win the X Games and win the, you know, Sims Worlds up in Whistler. Like that dude rode everything and everything. And I think that obviously influenced me a lot as well, just to be like, yeah, you can, like, like, if you want to be a kind of in that upper level of pro, you need to do backcountries, rails, park shoots, and contests, you know? So, yeah, it's definitely a mission, and it's pretty brutal, but yeah, nowadays it's pretty wild. Like people just kind of like pick, and they're like, I only ride a 140. Yeah, it's pretty.
Yeah,
you can
focus on anything. I'd love to ask you, just to kind of throw this into a different direction. We kind of started flowing there heavy, which was dope. But growing up, childhood, what was it like for Eddie? Touch base on that, and you know, Pennsylvania, like snowboarding. What was that for you?
Yeah, so I was born in Philadelphia, but then when I was 5 years old, my family moved out to a log cabin that my dad had built in Pennsylvania, in the middle of nowhere.
Sick.
Very isolated, only a couple neighbors. I mean, our closest neighbor is pretty far away. And so I basically was just like a normal kid. I played, you know, basketball and base, like little league, whatever. And then when I was about 12, we were in this little video rental store when those existed. And I saw this skateboard video, and I didn't really, I mean, I kind of knew what skateboarding was, but not really. And I rented this video, and it just like blew my mind. I watched it like 20 times that night. And then when I returned it, I asked the video store if I could buy it. And then they said yes. So I like went and did some work, helped my dad do some work, and got some money, and then went and bought it. And that was like, so it was crazy. I was just like, I am now a skateboarder. And I was like, I quit every other sport. And I'm like, I didn't even have a skateboard yet, but I'm like, I am a skateboarder. I want to dress like these guys. I want to be like these guys, you know? And so, yeah, so I got really into skateboarding. And then it was, when it was wintertime, I wanted to do something. And obviously East Coast, it's freezing, lots of snow out there. And so I heard of snowboarding through like a skateboarding magazine. And yeah, I mean, I just bought like an old used Burton Air snowboard. And I would just bought some used outerwear from like a thrift store or something. And then I would snowboard in my backyard. We had like a hill. And then at one point, I mean, back then there was a little resort about an hour and a half from our house. It had 3 chairlifts, real small. And that, I think a season pass at that time was maybe $300 or like $250. So I would work with my dad in the summers, and because he had like a plumbing and heating business, and I was able to get enough money to buy a pass. And so, and then my dad, I think, you know, he wanted to spend time with me. So he was like, oh, I'll try this snowboarding thing. And then my dad loved it. So then we just got into it together. And then it was great because he was like, yeah, like every weekend, let's go snowboarding. And
wow.
Yeah.
What a sick thing to be able to share with your dad.
Yeah. And he's 72 now, and he still rides like 100 days a year.
Oh, I've seen him in your parts and stuff like that. Oh yeah, he rips.
Yeah. So, so we just grew up. I just grew up riding with him. And then I ended up going to a boarding school and it was a lot closer to that mountain. So My parents would come down on the weekend, pick me up at the boarding school, and then we would go snowboard. And I would say like all through high school, I was skateboarding and snowboarding the same amount. And I was like competing in local contests in both, doing horrible in both generally. Like some contests I would get dead last, some like there was one or two, like a couple that I did good at. But I was not like a very good, I don't think I would have been considered myself a very great snowboarder, you know? And at that time, in high school, I was like, oh, I want to move to California because that's where like everybody in the videos were. And I was like, I want to be either a pro skateboarder or a pro snowboarder. And I wasn't, that's like my mentality. Like, should I be in the NBA or the NFL? I don't know, you know? And, but the funny thing is that there wasn't, you know, I would tell my parents or my teachers or my friends, I was the only kid in my school who snowboarded or skateboarded. And so, and this is in the 90s. So you weren't like cool if you were a skateboarder. Like now, if you're in high school in California and you're a good skater, you're like the cool guy. Like the girls are like, want to date you, you know?
You
like,
paved the way. It was not the same, eh?
yeah. In the early 90s or in the mid 90s, you know, people were like, what is that stupid little piece of wood you're rolling around on? And it was still like the football players and, you know, those guys were the cool guys. So, so it's funny looking back at that, but yeah, I think, you know, I had talked to my dad once and I was like, oh, should I move to San Francisco and try to be a pro skateboarder, or should I move to Tahoe and be a pro snowboarder? And he was like, well, it was really interesting because this one conversation honestly like altered the course of my life. Because he was like, well, he's like, would you rather live in the city and like skateboard in the streets and in like alleyways, or would you rather live in like the mountains and like explore pristine peaks that like no one's ever been on? And I was like, oh yeah, mountains for sure, because that was like my background, you know, growing up in the woods. So I was like, yeah, mountains, okay, like I'll do the snowboarding thing. And I went to Tahoe, you know. And it was interesting how simple that conversation was. But I think but again, I was telling everybody I wanted to move out west to be a pro snowboarder, and people were like, well, what does that mean? Like, do you get paid to do that? Do you, what does that even mean? Like, because this was before like Tony Hawk hadn't done his big 900 yet. Shaun White was like not even born yet. You know, it's like this is before there was this like, you know, the X Games I think had just started. Like I think the first X Games might have been in 1998. Like there was not like snowboarding was not like a career choice. It was like non-existent. But I was just like, well, all I know is there's these videos and there's like people in them, and I want to be those people. So I was like, I'm just going to go try to figure out how to do that. And I was like, I was like, I don't know how maybe they wash dishes, but I'll just go do it, you know? And then, I moved out west with like a couple $100 in my pocket. That was it. And I got a job as a nighttime janitor at Kirkwood, which is that's a really good resort in South Lake Tahoe. And the being a nighttime janitor is like the best thing ever, because you are I worked from 4 p.m. until midnight. So then I could just sleep from midnight till 8 in the morning and then ride all day, every day. So that first season I rode like, you know, 8 hours a day for the entire season. And then luckily the guys that I was working with who were janitors there, they were also worked the kitchen at Windell's up in Mount Hood. And so I was like, oh my God, can I come up with you guys? And they were like, yeah, you can be the dishwasher, but there's no pay. All you get is a place to sleep. You can eat food because you're working in the kitchen, and then you'll get a pass to go ride. And I'm like, great, that's all I need. And so I just I had bought like a car for like $400 or $500. It was like an old 1978 Toyota Corolla. Drove that thing like all the way up to Mount Hood, you know, worked that whole summer. And then that was a summer where my riding, I think, really started to progress a lot. Because I had finally gotten into a place with really good park jumps, really good rails, and then just that environment of being surrounded by like highly motivated people who wanted to push their riding. So everybody was just feeding off of each other, you know. So that was kind of what kind of sprung me into it.
Buddy, Wow, that is a sick, quick glimpse. Wow, you recapped that well. I love the Corolla part. Bro, I
Yeah.
just holding on. You're like, I'm going to Mount Hood. Don't care if I'm getting paid at all. Dishwasher, free food, campus, like to go snowboarding in the summer at that point. Like,
Oh man.
and all the videos you would have been watching. I feel like there wasn't a lot of like legit backcountry other than like a couple of the standard movies. But like most snowboard videos, like late 90s, were just, it was just like 75% like slushy park jump gaps on the hill,
Yep.
like summer shredding. So you're probably like, fuck yeah, let's do this.
Oh
Was there
man.
any notable riders when you first showed up that first year that you were like, damn? And then I saw,
Yeah. I mean, one of the first people I met was Barrett Christie, and it like blew my mind because I was like, oh my gosh, Barrett Christie. Like she was like bigger than God at that time. And it's so funny because now, you know, I've known her for 20 years and we always talk about that. But I mean, she was one of the first people I had met, and she was already like a very well-known pro at that time. But Chris Ingelsman was working at the camp. Even though he was a pro, he was just like, so, I mean, he was one of the most like obsessed snowboarders of all time, probably still is. But I mean, even though he worked as a digger in the summer just to be like on snow riding. And so I met Chris Ingelsman. That was pretty epic. Trying to think of like who else was up there at that time. I mean, there was obviously a lot of people coming through, but those are the ones that really,
sick.
you know, stick out.
Those are two great plugs. And then the next year, do you venture to Mammoth? Because I feel like when I think of Eddie Wall, I think of Grenade, Mammoth. What was that transition like? You know, you're done at the summer camp. Do you go back to Tahoe and pack up your shit and go to Mammoth?
Yeah, so exactly. So essentially, well, I didn't have anything to pack up because it was just like I had nothing. but I had my Corolla and like my snowboard and like a backpack, you know. But
a couple free sandwiches.
Yeah. So exactly. Yeah. So my mentality at that time was, because there was no Instagram, there was no Facebook, there was none of that. So there were only magazines and videos. So, and people actually communicating with each other. Right. So I was like asking everybody, you know, like, where are all the best snowboarders? Where do they ride in the winter? Like, and I had heard of Mammoth, you know, and I'd seen it in so many videos and so many magazines. So I kept asking people up in Mount Hood, like, oh, is Mammoth a good place to go? And everyone was like, yeah, that's like where you want to go if you want to, you know, push your riding. So at that time, I always compare it. It was like the North Shore of surfing or something, right? If you could go to Mammoth and get as good as those guys, then you would probably have to get noticed. And that was my mentality. So yeah, I called up in the middle of the summer when I was a dishwasher. I called Mammoth and asked for a nighttime janitor job again, a different resort, and then went down, got it, and got employee housing, which is dope. So got employee housing and made the trip down. And I didn't, I just got down there. Actually, one of my friends, Kevin Keller, came out, and he was going to be a nighttime janitor that year there as well. So I knew one person. And then so I started riding that year, and that was the year, I mean, Mammoth in the year 2000 was just mental. I mean, you would see every single big name pro there. This was even the early 2000s, but especially the year 2000, 2001. I mean, it was like every day you would just see the super pros lapping. It was like Kevin Jones, Tara Dakitis, in the preseason, like Travis Parker, Andrew Crawford, all of like, you know, Matt Hammer, Gabe Taylor, all of these massive pros were just lapping and training basically. And it was just nuts to be, again, it'd be like paddling out to Pipeline and just being like, oh my God, there's, you know, Kelly Slater and so, you know, Ian Walsh, you know. So it was pretty insane time. And at that exact time, without me knowing it, there was this whole East Coast migration of, you know, Danny Cass, Matt Cass, Kyle Clancy, Colin Langlois, Zach Leach, the whole Grenade crew who came out pre-Grenade. But so there was this real crazy energy in Mammoth. It was like all these young kids and then all these super pros, and like all the young kids were like wanted to be the super pros, and everyone was just feeding off of each other. And the pros were like, well, we need to be better than these young kids. And we're like, well, we need to be better than them. And all of us in our circle are like, well, we need to all be better than each other. But it was all friendly and fun. But man, it was like at the time I didn't really necessarily totally see it that way, because you're just like in it, but looking back, you're like, whoa, that was a pretty crazy time that amount of good snowboarders were all riding one park all the time. It was just a pretty, it'd be like showing up to a skate park and you're like, oh, there's Andrew Reynolds and Greco and so, and you're just like, everybody's just cruising. So that was the season that things kind of took off for me. I had ridden really well up in Mount Hood. And so I didn't have any sponsors at this time or anything. But that season, two of the guys who worked at Mount Hood, Corey Smith went on to be the team manager at Smith Optics, and Brian Craighill went on to be the team manager at K2. So when they both got their jobs, like at the beginning of that winter in Mammoth, they were asked, hey, do you have any young kids to bring onto the team? And they had both said, my name. And so right as I start my janitorial jobs at K2 or at Mammoth, a couple months in, I got sponsored by K2 and Smith. And I actually think it was Smith was my first, and then K2. And so they were each giving me a couple $100. So in my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm making money. I'm a pro. Yeah. Like straight up, I thought I was a millionaire.
Drinks
right?
on Eddie.
yeah. And so I quit being a janitor halfway through that season and was like, hey, I'm gonna I didn't quite think it through, because I was staying in employee housing. So when I quit, they're like, okay, well, you can't stay in employee housing anymore. And I'm like, oh shoot, I have to find an apartment. So I found a room to rent with with a couple people, and the room was like $500 a month, but I was only making like $600 a month. And so I was probably like, I think I broke it down once, and I was living off roughly $20 a month for that winter. Like after
under $1 a day.
Yeah. So I would just go get like bulk pasta, and then I would eat like just peanut butter sandwiches, like for that season. But again, I thought I was like the richest person in the world, because I didn't have to actually work a regular job. So that season, I met Kevin Jones, and I was filming. I met Kevin Jones in the park, and in the park I had met this guy, Tori Piro, who was filming a video called Empire. And he had this production company called Exodus Productions, and it was like Matt Hammer, Gabe Taylor, all these Mammoth locals were in it. And that was like my first part that I started filming. And it wasn't even like, I didn't even think I was filming a part. It was more like, just go to the park and hit the jump and someone's going to be filming you. And I'm like, yeah, cool. Okay. But I ended up filming a good part for them. And then during the filming of that, I met Kevin Jones, and he, I think was, I think he was he wasn't towards the end of his career, but he was like at the peak ish, if not like just barely starting to go down. And I think maybe, and again, I don't know, but I think like when he met me, he was like, oh, cool. Like we kind of fed off of each other, he was like, oh, here's this young kid who wants to ride 8 hours a day, and he needed that. And I was like, oh, here's this pro who's a super pro and who I look up to. And so, yeah, I mean, I just remember him coming to pick me up at my house in his truck, and he had like an F-350 lifted, like the sickest truck in the world. And I had my broken down Toyota Corolla 1970
with 2 moldy sandwiches in it.
Oh yeah.
From Hood that you forgot about.
Yeah. I remember he would like go out to get dinner, and I just remember being like, whoa, like he can eat at a restaurant? Like that's crazy. Like to me, going to a restaurant was like I remember, I think he took me out to dinner once, or I'm sure he did more than once, but like, and I remember, I think it was like $20. And I remember being like, that's my monthly budget for dinner. Like, oh my God, like freaking out. Like, it's funny to think back to that, but that was what really kick-started it. And then him and Teradakidis were starting Genius Snowboards. And so they were like, hey, do you want to be on the team? And Andreas Vig was, out in Mammoth, that same thing, young buck. And So they were like, it'll be Kevin Jones, Tara Takitis, and then the 2 young kids, Andreas and Eddie. And I went to K2 and I was like, hey, you know, I think I only had a year contract with them, but I was just like, hey, you guys have been great, but you know, I gotta go with KJ and Tara Takitis, you know, and that, yeah, then that kicked it off, and then it really just like went from there.
What a fast, the transition from, you know, you living in the middle of the woods in Pennsylvania to to driving out here to being like, I went for dinner with Kevin Jones and I'm on Genius. Must have been pretty crazy.
Yeah, it was.
Your dad calls you like, so what's the update? You're like, this is going to sound crazy, but shit went really good at Mount Hood.
Yeah.
I drove to Mammoth and I'm best friends with Kevin Jones and I'm on his company now.
It is wild. Like when you look back at it that in that sense, like, I always compare it. It's kind of like if you're playing basketball at your local, you know, and then you go, and then you're like, I'm going to move to Venice and play at the Venice courts. And then like Michael Jordan's like, hey man, you want to come and like play on the Lakers or the Bulls or whatever? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
You're like, what? Like, you know, and maybe not that extreme, but it was definitely, I mean, there was like, within a 2-year period, I went from like being a janitor with no money to being on like a world tour with Forum, you know, filming for video gangs or something, and just like being on a team, because then Genius very quickly got moved into Forum because Burton had bought that 4-star distribution. And so when Burton bought them, they were like, hey, instead of Genius, this tiny thing, let's just move those guys onto the Forum team. And so all of a sudden now I'm on a team with Peter Line and Devin Walsh and JP and Jeremy and Yoni Malamy. And I'm just like, this is absolutely
the remainder of the Forum 8, just like,
yeah. So that was just unbelievable. I mean, of course, as a kid growing up, that was there was nobody bigger than that. It wasn't like they were my all-time biggest favorite, you know, craziest pros. So to be on a team with them was just really insane and strange and odd and cool, you know.
Video, like you did like video gangs. I feel like for me as a kid growing up, I was the kid still in Pennsylvania and you were like, you know, the Kevin Jones for me, you know what I mean? You had filmed video gangs. I had that. My mom finally let me put a TV in my bedroom and I would just watch video. There's no video I watched more than video gangs. Like,
Oh, cool.
I was like obsessed with Forum. I had a Lowry poster of his sequence Switchback 270. Like I had every single one of those songs on my mini disc player.
Yeah.
I can name every single clip. And like, if I watch that movie, I know every boot that people are wearing, every glove, every frame in that movie. And that one was a big one for me. What was filming for video game gangs like for you? You said that you filmed for the local Mammoth video with Gabe Taylor and, you know, all those legends, all those Mammoth guys. What was it like to transition and film for a Forum movie after videos like True Life?
Yeah.
And now you're in the movie.
Yeah, it's pretty surreal. Like, and again, I think when you're in it, you're just like so in it and wrapped up that it's hard to process it. But looking back, it's pretty crazy. And actually there was one in between. So I was filming for the local Mammoth video. And then right when I got on, the year I was on Genius, I filmed with Mac Dog, which again, that was actually the kind of, and that was called Pulse.
Pulse. Oh yeah. Sorry.
Which is
yeah, I remember.
pretty like a low radar Mac Dog film. But
that was one of the worst Mac Dog movies. No offense to Mac Dog. I'm the biggest Mac Dog fan of all time. But Pulse I watched once when I was a kid and I was like, can't do it.
Yeah. The weird editing.
Editing was just annoying. Yeah. Devin had such a good part in Pulse too, but that gets overlooked because Pulse is just not a movie that people bring up very often.
No, it's funny. And I almost forget about it a lot of times, but that was kind of my first like intro kind of into like real filming. Like we would actually go to a rail and Dogger would show up and we would actually film and but
that
like
must have been crazy too.
That
Mac Dog filming you and you're like,
dude, the first rail I ever went to film street rail hitting was in North Star, and it's that 30 stair cheese grater that, you know, a lot of people hit over the years. Arrow, Etala, Kevin, a bunch of people. And Kevin got the cover that night because he did a back lip on it. And I had never hit a street rail, and this thing was massive and scary, and I front boarded it, but like just was so terrified. And it's the first time filming with Mac Dog ever. I'm just like, I'm meeting this guy. It'd be like a cinematographer, like meeting, you know, freaking
Spike Lee.
Yeah, exactly. George Lucas, like, hey, you know, or whatever. And so I'm like, oh my gosh. And so yeah, and anyways, but yeah, we filmed for that. And then but yeah, the crazy one was video gangs. And the thing about video gangs that's really crazy is I went into that season, like that was my first season. Actually, I was still on Genius, but they were like, let's film the Forum and Genius team will be filming together. So it was a Forum video. So it's like, whatever. But yeah, I was just like, all right, I need to prove that I can, you know, hang with these guys, that I deserve to be on this team or in this video. So I went into that season, and this was like one of my first seasons. I was young, I was super hungry. And, you know, so I went into that season just wanting to film the best video part ever. So we did, man, it might've only been one trip to Finland. So we go to Finland, and this was before really anyone had filmed in Finland besides Joni Malmi. And, I mean, in a big video. And we're just like, oh my God, you can film any handrail. You don't get kicked out. It was just like unbelievable. So and everything just clicked, you know, we were just we'd hit 2-3 spots a day and just be getting crazy tricks. And I was, you know, just riding really well at that time, and I could get tricks relatively fast, and it was just like everything was clicking. And so that was it. Like I had filmed my rails. Like I said, you know, I always December, January, or January, February would always be like solid rails. And then we go into the backcountry. And so I fly back. So we film that all January. I fly home straight to the X Games. This might've been my very first X Games. I didn't even think about that. Did the X Games and hadn't even hit a park jump all year, and like showed up to X Games road practice, and then was like, oh, here's your run.
Mind you, X Games didn't have that pressure like it does now. I feel like Eddie showing up to X Games early 2000s, it's like a party. People are like, it's almost like a vacation for you coming back from the rails. You just killed it filming in the rails, and you're like, I'm at X Games, let's party for a few days.
Yes.
That's not the mentality X Games athletes have now.
No, it was definitely a party. And I mean, it was still nerve-wracking. I mean, I knew X Games was still a big deal, but the thing is it wasn't a big deal for Forum, because Forum didn't care about contests. They didn't care about having contest riders on there. You know, that was like the whole like filmers and contest riders. Like they wanted to be core filmers. That's it. So they were like, you can do it. They didn't even care. They actually didn't even want me to do it, because they're like, this is taking you away from filming, you know? But I went and did it. And I didn't qualify, or I qualified, but I didn't get top 3. And I was pretty frustrated. And so I get to the bottom of the corral of my run, see my score. I'm all bummed. And one of our filmers, Nathan Yant and Ian Reuter, the photographer, were there. And I just walk over to them and I'm like, let's go film a street rail right now. And I'm like, I'm not going to let this day go be unproductive. And they were like, dude, you've been up practicing since the morning. Like, you just competed. We shouldn't go hit a handrail. And I was like, no, let's go right now. Like, I want to go get a shot. So I went from the contest, walked into the car, and we drove to a handrail. And it was this curved kink trail that was at Aspen High School. And that's when I did the board slide. I landed, I rode out. And then that's when I shattered my kneecap, and it came out of my leg. And I go into like a crazy open knee surgery, you know, like career basically could be over in that split second. And just going back to video gangs, what's kind of crazy is I still have people now saying like, oh, that video part is like one of my favorite video parts and all this stuff. And I'm like, dude, I filmed that video part in 1 month, January. It was 1 or 2 trips. And I was like, I didn't even get to like because I wanted ending part, you know, that was my
Yeah.
thing, you know, and I think there might have been a bonus too, like, oh, Coach Forum would really try to get everybody, you know, hyped
Competitive.
up.
Get
Yeah.
it done.
Yeah, they wanted us like going at each other, and yeah, so I was just like, oh my gosh, with that starting off with that rails, like I had a full part like before almost anybody else had any shots. So I was like, oh dude, I'm gonna go in the backcountry and then I'm gonna go hit the park, and I was like, I'm gonna get a 4-minute ender in this video, you know. And then that all went out the window, and I shattered my kneecap, and was like, I remember I woke up from the surgery, and I instantly woke up, was like all out of it because I was, you know, under for a while. And then the surgeon was there, and the first thing I say was like, when can I compete again? When can I compete? When can I, like, I was saying compete because he wouldn't understand like filming.
Yeah.
And I was like, when can I do something at the X Games level again? And we were in Aspen, and he was like, he just looked at me like very like almost sad. And I just remember him putting his hand on my shoulder, and he's like, let's focus on getting you to walk properly again. And I was just like devastated. I think I just started crying right then. And I was like, oh, this is a real big deal, you know? And yeah, I mean, long story short, it took 3 more surgeries and a year of rehab of like physical therapy nonstop. Like I took it to the whole other level. I was like, I'm going to train like 8 hours a day. And then, and man, I went into this crazy, I was just home in Mammoth, like in my condo, just watching these guys go out and film. And I was just so.
You were watching snowboarding?
The videos?
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like most people, if they get injured, the last thing they ever want to do is watch a snowboard video. And you said you're watching snowboard videos after that injury, I'm imagining.
No, so I went into a way, I took it the total opposite. I was like, okay, if my job was to be the best pro snowboarder in the world, it was to be a pro snowboarder. I was like, I'm going to even become more obsessed with snowboarding. And so I would watch snowboard videos, and I have these notebooks. I would dissect every video. Like I took True Life, and I would break down like JP's part, for example, and I would list out how many backcountry shots he had, how many park shots he had, how many rail shots he had, how many lifestyle shots he had, the exact amount of time, what tricks. Like I would write out all these pages of just studying so that I could be like, when I come back, I'm going to like mimic all of these best parts, and I'm going to get this percentage of tricks and this percentage of street rails and this percentage of backcountry. And then became obsessed with rehab and working out and like all this visualization techniques. And I would like meditate and see myself doing tricks. Like looking back, it was almost like, I was almost like a little bit crazy, because I was just sitting in this condo by myself, like becoming as obsessed with snowboarding as possible. And
you went full Albert Einstein on them. Snowboard. Yeah. There's just like drawings all over your wall. Like if somebody would have came in, they'd be like, "Are you all right in here?"
Yeah,
man?
yeah.
Snowboarding is all mapped out like a freaking crime scene
with like little pins and the
pins all over JP's face to Jeremy to one big master in the middle. It's Craig Kelly.
Dude. Yes, absolutely. So it's funny because then what was crazy is my rehab was like, or my physical therapy, I just like lived in the gym, and I was like, well, if I can't work out my knee, because my knee was in like a straight brace type of thing, and the atrophy had made my thigh so small, it was like the size of my wrist. So I lost, like my whole left leg was just gone. It was like when I was finally able, they crushed all the cartilage up to bend my knee. They said, okay, like I was sitting on a bench, and they're like, okay, lift your right knee. And I just did this, you know, and they're like, lift your left knee. And I was like, and it just barely moved. And in my head, it went up, but my quad and my hamstring was so atrophied that I didn't have enough strength to lift my own foot. So at that point, I just start slowly every day, like sitting on the end of my bed, trying to move it. And then eventually I moved it. And then eventually I could get enough motion to get on a bicycle. And then it was like, I'd be on a spin bike for 6 hours a day. And I was, man, I wish I was in that good of shape now. I was like, I wanted the rest of my body to be in good shape. So when I came back, I was doing like, I could do like like 100 pull-ups and like 500 sit-ups, like all this crazy stuff. You know, the gym ended up sponsoring me because they were like, you're here longer than our employees. They're like, you can come for free. You don't have to pay anymore. And so I didn't have to pay for the gym membership anymore. But when I came back was in January or February. It was exactly 1 year later. And I filmed Promo Copy. And that is, to this day, my favorite part that I've ever filmed.
Yeah, I think that's my favorite Eddie part for sure. The beginning,
thanks.
the cab 2 and the back 270 to start it off, like on that Glen Rosa rail with Simone, like, yeah, that's a special part. That was the good vibes and the editing to that. I mean, I always feel like your filmers, your personality and who you are as an individual is so amazing that filmers have always done you justice. As far as like a little kid looking in and never have met you, I was always like, that's snowboarding. That guy's having fun. He's good. He rides all the features and he looks like he's having fun. It's almost like your personality encapsulated like robot food 24/7. It was just like Eddie Wall's just the fun guy having fun snowboarding. It was like all your parts were sick.
Right.
It gave off that vibe. So kudos to your filmers and editors you got to work with over the years, because they did a good job marketing you. That's for sure.
Yeah, I got fortunate to work with some amazing guys over the year, especially those years. I mean, well, the Forum years were a lot of Nathan Yett and Ian Reuter, and then Promo Copy was, you know, Sean Johnson, Pascal Gallant, those guys. But you know, what's really funny is, you know, I think it's super interesting because the years of Promo Copy and the next one was Derelictica, and those were Sean Johnson films, because those are 2 years that Forum was like, they did Video Gangs, and then they're like, we're gonna take a little break and then we're gonna do another movie. And it's funny because those two movies, Promo Copy and Derelictica, were Sean Johnson under Defective Films, and they didn't get, you know, their Forum, their marketing was so insane, and they would do world tours and it was like unbelievable. Well, but you know, Sean Johnson, this was just his film company. It was a smaller film company. And I felt like those movies definitely didn't get the distribution or the hype that they deserved for the level of writing in them. And I was always a little bit bummed. And then side note, while I was filming for those, I would do like a 2-week trip or a 1-week trip down to the DC Mountain Lab and film parts there. And then it's so funny because DC Mountain Lab came out, and it was like, again, because of marketing and the videos were great, that those like went to the moon. And I mean, I was like, I filmed that in 3 weeks, you know, like
box tricks. It's your warm-ups.
Yeah, I'm like, come on, look at Promo Copy, everybody. But there wasn't like social media. I couldn't like, there's no way for me to get it out there, you know, besides telling people. And it's funny because I remember the first time I met all the Man Boys, I was like, I was at probably a premiere, or maybe it was at a Trans World Awards, but like before. And I remember like you and Rusty and Razman and everybody were like, oh, Eddie Wall, like Promo Copy. Oh, and I was like, yes. I was like, you guys saw it? Like, oh my God. Like, I was so happy that like some guys had seen it. And then I was like, oh yeah, you're Canadian, because Sean Johnson was Canadian. So in Canada, that movie was really well known. And I think in the US, you know, it was around, but not as big, you know. And I just remember being so hyped that you guys had seen that and we're all hyped on it, you know.
Oh, dude, that whole movie, both those movies, Promo Copy and Derelictica, I thought were so sick. I mean, you could go through that. It helped Andreas, Simone, I mean, Travis Kennedy. I mean, and then was Forum that in between that, or?
No, that was after Derelictica. So then,
okay.
Yeah. So basically it went like, so far it went the Empire, and then it went to Pulse, and then Video Gangs, Promo Copy, and Mountain Lab in the same year. Derelictica, Mountain Lab 1.5.
Dude, so you had like 4 years, including the double up with Mountain Lab. So 5 video parts over 4 years, that the traction for Eddie was just getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
During those years, I
also
filmed my grenade parts too.
Oh yeah, Full Metal Edges.
All those ones. So yeah, that was like, again, I was just like just hell bent, you know.
If anybody could have seen you that one year when you had all the pins all over the walls, like that's insane though. Like that dedication, that's what made you like, I like to hear that because your career was so successful, but I also like to hear that it wasn't just handed to you on a silver platter. Like Eddie made this fucking shit happen.
Yeah.
And anyone who's listening, I mean, that chapter on you being like shattering your kneecap and the doctor saying, like putting his hand slowly on your shoulder and telling a young kid that, hey, I know that the one thing that you want more than anything is to go ride at the level of the X Games, but let's focus on walking right now.
Yeah.
And to hear that and then to get over that by, you know, biking and being at the gym longer than the employees, and then for that to pay off is just like, dude, you deserve that. Way to go.
Yeah, no, thanks. I mean, I just always had this mentality of like, if I am more obsessed and I work harder than every other person, I'm like, how can I fail? You know?
And it didn't. It made for one of the best careers in snowboarding.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, yeah, it's no, I mean, I think there's something to be said for just pure dedication and obsession kind of. And it's funny, I'm trying to get that now with my current job, and I am obsessed with it. But I used to love having that hell-bent drive and obsession with something. But again, it's pretty rare to find that type of a thing. And yeah, but you know, life happens. There's all sorts of other things. When you're like 21, there's nothing else like in life. It's, you know, you don't have anything. You don't have bills. You don't have anything.
Let's touch base on the Forum That movie. I want to go over that movie in particular because correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that movie was Forum has been very infamous for, you know, wanting to film the best movies since The Resistance. I'm imagining going into that season, no longer being the Forum 8 and having that pressure, like we need to film the best snowboard video ever.
Yes.
And the entire crew going into that movie, knowing that, and then not only are you guys end up producing, but like take me through that mental state of, you know, realizing that you're filming for a Forum movie, they're putting the money behind the movie fully, and that pressure to bring Eddie's best footage ever to the table, really in one of like the most important Forum movies, I would say, as far as the re-up goes. Because I feel like if the Forum That movie was a flop, it kind of would have been like, you know, Forum just dissipating. But instead of that, it ends up being really well. So take us through. I mean, was there mental pressure for Eddie going into that?
You know, yes and no. Absolutely yes, which I'll get to. In the sense of no, because I had already, you know, I was coming off of, again, you know, promo copy Derelictica, the two DC Mountain Lab videos. Like I was in my prime of all prime, and my confidence level was really high at that time. You know, I was in really good shape. Everything was there and everything was clicking. So in that sense, like I was very confident that I could film a good part. But yes, the amount of pressure was insane because, I mean, they flew the entire team to Vancouver. No, not to snowboard, like just to Vancouver before the season. They flew us up there and we had a meeting in a hotel, a big board meeting. And Sean Kearns was there. And I think he's basically the one who gave the meeting, and he was just like, don't even bother spinning under a 720. They were like, don't even bother hitting a backcountry jump under 80 feet. It won't get used. It won't get used. It will get cut. Don't even bother hitting a rail that's under 30 stairs. It will get cut. And they were just like looking at all of us and they were like, you are going to all film the gnarliest video part you've ever filmed. And they're like, if you think like, oh, I could do like a 900, he's like, do a 1080, do a 1260. They were like, he's like, it will get cut. This has to be and he's like, we're not going to go out and film some 15 stair handrail for you to try some basic trick on. Like it was they were blunt about it. And they also, again, kind of pitted us. I think there was like a $10,000 or $20,000 for whoever got a bonus for whoever got last part. So everybody was like gunning for last part. So And I always say like the rails were a bit different. Like, it's funny because it was, no matter what, it's like, it's cool and it was fun, but like filming for Forum was like a very serious thing. Like, especially in the backcountry, because you have light and limited time and limited days. And I mean, like, I didn't have like fun filming in the backcountry. There was no fun to be had. It was like, you get to the thing, you start building, and like, you better get a trick. And if you don't, like, everyone's going to be mad, like, it was crazy. Like, I remember I remember talking to Brian Fox at one point when I like years after that. And I was like, he said like, oh man, the backcountry's so fun. And I actually was like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, yeah, like going out, building jumps, hit like that. He's like, it's so fun. And I was like confused. I was like, that's weird. I was like, I've never had fun in the backcountry. Like, that was like the most stressful shit of my life. Like, that was like, get a trick or ragdoll and then just walk home bummed out, like it, the streets were a little bit different because we had it so dialed. And I mean, it was still, again, scary. And you would roll up the spots and the filmers would just be like, no, we're not taking our cameras out. Like, oh, I want to nose press this thing. No, it's not big enough. Like that, those were real conversations that we were used to that, and Forum had that expectation. But like, when I told other crews that, they were like, what? Like, are you serious? Like, they would tell you that something was too small or like, absolutely, like,
Yeah, which, looking back at where snowboarding was at that point, the go big or go home era, Forum like really embraced that at that point. And they do for the following years almost, which I kind of think like is a recipe for disaster, to be honest, because a lot of people that are more on the creative side might be like, this is a smaller rail, but like no one's done for example, a lot of your really technical tricks, cab 360, 50-50, like when Joe Sexton was really big onto the back 350-50s. It's like, it's still innovative and progressive. It's like, you compare it to skateboarding, someone's not going to go do a switch flip back lip on, a 16 stair. It's probably going to be on a 6 stair, but every kid is going to trip out. So for a filmer who's not in your shoes to tell you what is and what isn't, is really disregarding, the bigger picture of allowing somebody to get creative and showcase what they think is really sick. I understand that it was the go big or go home era, but I'm so grateful to be a part of snowboarding right now. That's like, you can ride like Mike Rav and get buttery and sloop around and do tail slides to regular on half pipes and not even have to air out of them. Or you can ride like Jake Blauvelt and just ride and turn down the hill. Or you can be a complete psycho and ride like Mark McMorris or anybody in between. You can really pick your avenue. But for that era, there was a recipe, and for Forum there was a recipe that they wanted delivered, and you guys delivered. Like, that movie was insane, but that's a scary meeting for someone like me to potentially have been in.
Yeah. And I think, it's so funny because I'll watch video parts now and like, that'll just be coming out recently. And I'm always just like, oh, like we would have never been able to film that rail, or like,
Yeah, lots of people say that.
But again, it's like, it couldn't have just kept going like that forever. And also, I mean, I love the creative riding and I love cool weird spots or like where guys are like riding down the street and they'll like hit a fence and then ollie a garbage can and then do, and I wanted to do a lot of that stuff, which is why I think I loved the DC Mountain Lab so much, as I was like, oh, I can do all this cool, fun, creative stuff. And I don't just have to hit a 30 stair handrail. And there were times at Forum where I was like, oh, can we do this? Or can I do this like weird up and over thing? And they were, they would just be like, no, you can't. And if you look at, I think it's in promo copy, was like, I was doing some weird, like rock rides and stuff. And like, I'd put like, I'd go put like snow up on these rocks and do little different like rock gaps.
Love those clips.
And, like, I really loved that stuff. But again, like as soon as you start, like that wasn't a Forum movie. And then as soon as you start working with Forum, they're like, no, you can just only do the gnarliest stuff. Like almost like Flip, those like Sorry and Really Sorry. Those videos were like, no, like you're either jumping down 13 stairs or you're not getting a video part,
Yeah, they would rather like opener like Ali Boulala try to ollie like a 30 stair and not make it than
Right.
like to go to a spot that's not big.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a cool era to be part of, and it definitely pushed us, and it pushed snowboarding, I think. And it's funny. Actually, it's funny you mentioned that about rails. Like in video gangs, I did a backside 270 onto a 17 stair in Lake Tahoe, and that had never, from my understanding, a back 270 had never been done on a handrail. And I did it perfect, and it actually ran as an agency ad, which was like a binding company back then.
Oh, I remember, yeah.
But but they were like, no, this doesn't make the cut. And I was like, it's a backside. I was like, I don't think this has ever been done on a, and I'm not claiming, I'm sure somebody had done it before me. I don't know. But I was like, dude, I've never seen this in a video, and it's on a street rail. Like, I've only seen this done on park rails. And they're like, it's too small. And I'm like, it's a 17 stair. And they're like, doesn't matter. It doesn't look big on film, and we're not using it. And I just remember being so bummed because the ad ran, but then that year, Jeremy Jones did it, not at the rail garden, but at that other kind of mellow rail that's like square that they did like tons of different tricks on. Anyways, JP did the first nose press on it. But Jeremy,
oh, I know the rail you're talking about.
yeah, it lands, it goes into that, like there's a bridge after it.
Yeah. The one they hit with like Mikey LeBlanc, and I think it's in Tech Diff.
Yep. And Jeremy did a backside 270 on that year, and everybody was like
losing their mind.
Jeremy did a backside 270 onto a street rail, and I remember just being so bummed, like,
yeah, an ad, especially like if it wasn't a sequence, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're like, but I did it.
Yeah,
that sucks.
but whatever.
I look at like Lewiff's clip when he did like I don't know, he's done a lot, like the back 270 to switch, that he was the first person to ever do that. Was on like a 17, maybe a 20 stair rail, which I mean, that happened probably almost 10 years later. Or I think probably in 2010, I think he did that, or 2009.
Yeah.
So not 10 years later, like 5 or 6, but it's all in context. I mean, you know, if it's a back 270 to switch, you don't need to have it on 30 stair rail. But if you're doing a board slide, you know what I mean? Then yeah, you want the big kink or the big down rail. If you're doing a back 50, it's all context. So, I mean, I think that snowboarding, that's really evident right now, but it wasn't back then. And a lot of those filmers you were mentioning, like, you know, Kearns or Johnson, who had filmed a lot of those videos back then, were just from the era of like, no, you just go fucking big. Like you just, you know, go massive. And it's like, well, going kind of small and doing a cab 3 on a step down is still really sick, especially if you film a fisheye and you get the indie into the lens and they're like, it's small. You're like, but look at my style. I look like Noah Slasnik.
It was crazy. And yeah, but I mean, filming for that was cool. And what was really neat about that was that, of course, Forum pulled out all the stops, and there was a lot of money in snowboarding then. So we did a whole world tour and like went all over Europe, and they rented this huge tour bus that slept, you know, had like the 12 bunk beds, and we went all around the entire North American continent. And that was like,
let's talk about this.
Yeah, that was like unbelievable, you know, just going from, we went up the whole West Coast, up into Canada, across all of Canada, and then down the East Coast of the US, and then all the way back across. And it was 30 days, and we had a premiere every single day for 30 days.
Who died?
What's
like,
that? Yeah.
I'm surprised you guys made it home.
Yeah, I think like Jake Blavel and maybe Jake Welch got like so sick, like of 10 days into it, that they got sent home. And they actually, everybody was like 30 days is too much. So we split the trip. It was like half the team went the first 2 weeks and half the team went the second 2 weeks. But I was like, dude, I'm never gonna get to do this again. I was like, I'm going for the full month. And they're like, okay. So I went for the full month. I think I ended up, I like got dropped off in Pennsylvania and stayed home for a couple of days, and then flew out and met them in Utah or something. But I basically did the whole 30 days, and it was insane. Like I think it laid in bed and just for like probably 2 weeks after, and just didn't move, you know.
I wonder how much money they spent on those tours, because Forum, as most know, they weren't penny pinching in those days, you know. It was before 2008, so they were balling. So explain the ballingness of Forum for us.
Well, I mean,
let's hear about some things that were like pretty ballin', like 5-star hotels and stuff like that.
yeah, actually was filming for that. If you want like a story about that. Okay, so when we were filming that, we went to Sweden and we stayed in Stockholm, and we stayed in like this really cool hotel. We ended up, it was like a small, like super high-end boutique hotel type of thing, but like had a really cool bar and kind of like would have DJs come. And then we check in and we just check in for a month. And
who's we?
Like Stevie Bell, Travis Kennedy, Pat Moore, myself, different people kind of come and go. But there was like, I think our filmer, Jeremy Pettit, Cole,
but not Eddie. Eddie was there the whole time.
yeah, I was. And it ended up being 6 weeks that we were there. And we became friends with like the whole staff of the hotel. And we would just party every night and like film all day. And it was just, we would just order room service every night. It was like absolutely mental. And I think the 6-week bill for that was, I think, 68 grand or something, but which it does seem crazy. And I mean, that was like way over the top. But the thing is that was for like most of the team. And we actually we filmed like a huge part, because I remember when that whole conversation happened, and I don't think I was really part of it, but I remember Forum just being like, are you guys kidding me? Like, you guys just spent this much money. And everyone was like, well,
you're like, well, we went with Travis Kennedy. I don't know.
Yeah. What were we gonna do? Yeah. I mean, dude, there was rails. Actually, Travis Kennedy's last shot is a front board through a kink rail. His ender shot is a front board through a big kink rail, and then he goes into this like tunnel kind of. And like, he had partied that whole entire night and then went back to the hotel at like 8 a.m, put on his gear, and then came and met up with us. And he did that like third try. And it was just wild times, like just a lot of like, we didn't really even have our travel budget was almost unlimited, because we just went to them and we're like, all right, like if our travel budget's 10 grand, like, or 15 grand, and we spend that by the end of February, should we just like go home and stop filming, And they were like, well, no,
you little fuckers, eh?
Yeah.
Like,
and we were just like, so we need basically unlimited travel. And they were just like, I mean, again, they were just like telling us, you need to risk your lives and film the gnarliest video ever made. And we're like, all right, but you better, we're not going to stay with 6 of us in a Motel 6, like, we're going to live it up. So, yeah, it was very cool. And it's just wild to see how things have changed. I mean, it's like you said, after 2008, 2009, it was just like, gosh, like,
yeah,
they're like, you're stoked if you have a $5 grand travel budget,
Oh, dude. Yeah. I feel like nowadays, if you're getting $2 grand travel budget, if you make $1,000 a month from your board sponsor, like,
yep.
If you're in that realm, you are in the 1%, and you're just crushing it. But like, 2005 to like, I've had various pros from your area come on here, and some of them were, would share just some rough numbers, not their exact numbers. And you kind of get an idea of what those individuals were making. I know that you were crushing it on Forum, and we don't need you to say an exact number, but do you have a ballpark of like what budgets kind of looked like back then, what a monthly income, or like what a Forum contract, they're not even a real company anymore. Like, what did a Forum contract for Eddie look like?
I mean, I'll say they were like into 6 figures, and you got to think too, is I was on getting paid as a full like A+ team rider for Forum, and the exact same for DC too. So that was like pretty wild,
Yes, Eddie. Did you got the ring, eh?
Yeah, I still have it. Yeah, I still have it actually. It's in my sock drawer.
Oh, okay, nice.
I haven't worn it in a long time, but yeah, still got it. That was always a cool thing to get,
Big time. Wow, that was a lot to cover there. So, for Forum, you do another like 4 years with them and you get enrolled in the full new crew. And then you start to be kind of, you're mentoring these new kids. What was that last shift like on Forum? You have a whole new wave, lots of guys have come and gone. And then kind of just take us through those last few years.
Yeah. So let's see. So we did that, and then we did Former Against Them, which was pretty cool, but I got injured during that. So I had
Remember the intro?
Yeah, I jacked my knee, and then my first day back was in the spring, and I hit some massive park jump in Squaw because we were doing a shoot there, and I shattered my collarbone, and literally so I barely had a part in that in Former Against Them. And then the next year was Forever, and by that time I was getting a bit older, and I also this really spooked me because this took 4 shoulder surgeries to fix, and I got metal plates, 9 screws. So at that point, my knee is always been pretty jacked up from that original surgery. So I have really bad arthritis. So by the time Forever came around, I was definitely slowing down. And at that time, yeah, there were starting to get some new guys on Forum, but by the end of Forever, actually by the time Forever came out, so the way to explain the way my contracts worked, I originally was on DC, right? And they just made boots. So then when I got on a Forum, they were like, okay, we make boots and boards. So we'll sign them for boards because of the genius combination thing, but they were like, but we want him on Forum boots. And my agent was like, well, no, he's signed into a DC contract that's still 2 or 3 years. And so they were like, okay, well, when that's up, we'll bring him over to Forum boots. But what he did on purpose to keep both contracts going, when he would sign my Forum contract to not be up, he would go past my DC contract. So that time DC starts making snowboards. So now I'm on a board and boot company and a board and boot company at the same time for literally my whole career. It was
I always wondered about that.
Yeah. So then it was so then when DC came up, they were like, hey, we want Eddie head to toe to ride boards. And then they're like, oh, well, we can't because his Forum contracts doesn't expire for another year or 2. And then he kept boom, boom, doing that so that I could never get out of the other contract until, smartly so, he's like, we'll do that until you're 30. And then in 2010, you're going to turn 30. And then we'll have a little bit of a bidding war. Who are you going to go head to toe with? We'll sign a 5-year deal till you're 35, and then you'll be done. And that 5-year deal will help over that 5 years. You can kind of start to decide what you're going to do after snowboarding and all that stuff. Well, what happened was that all staggered, everything was going good, and we were about to go into contract negotiation, and of course we were telling both companies that the other one was going to come with a good contract, and then the 2008 2009 economy collapsed, and every company loses all their money, and nobody's out buying snowboards. It's just complete crash, and with basically, it may have been within the same day, but it might have been a week. I can't remember, but it was I think DC called me and was like, hey, we know Forum has a good contract for you. You should just go to Forum because we don't have any money. And I was like, okay, good run. I call it, or Forum calls me at the same time, and they're like, hey, you know what? We don't have any money, and we know DC's offering you a good contract. You should go to DC. And it was overnight, just boom, both completely gone. And that was that. And I was just like, damn.
No, you weren't just damn. Let's hear, can you kind of take us through what that felt like over the course of the next few months, years? How did that, that seems like it would have been pretty, not a easy pill to swallow if you really didn't see that coming.
No,
and you think that you're going to be set for another 5 years, and then it's legit over in, like you said, a matter of a day or 2. That's a big that's a big like, oh, so that's not happening anymore. My whole life is shifting
Yeah,
today.
it was crazy, but I think part of me was a little bit in denial. And I had also been talking to my agent, and he was like, at that time I was still like a very, even though I was 29, 29, I had still built like a solid career. So my agent was like, oh dude, don't even worry about it. We'll just go out and get you another sponsor. Like you're, you have such a big name. Don't worry about it. So I wasn't that concerned right off the bat at all. And then like we start calling companies, and every company kind of says the same thing. First of all, we have no money because of the economy collapse. And second of all, Eddie's about to turn 30 and he's so branded DC and Forum. Like I think we might've talked to 32, and they're like, dude, kids in like middle America are going to think he's on DC for still like 3 more years. Because again, this wasn't like social media wasn't around. You couldn't just release stuff. It was like people got it through magazines and things. So they were like, yeah, there's no way to unbrand him at this point in his career. And so basically everybody was just like, I mean, they were all like, yeah, dude, he kills it. Like he's had a great career, but we can't sign him. And so that's when it like really started to hit me of like, oh man, like, this is not good. And then I got a small break because this company, 2 people who were working at Forum, Dan McNamara and Christian Diedrichsen, who is actually working at Circa, they left and they started a small company called Weekend Snowboards and Bond Outerwear. And they had a bit of a budget. So they brought me on. And I think the team was myself, Heikki Sorsa, and Mark Carter. And so I was able to get a little contract out of that. And it wasn't a ton, but it was like, all right, it's a little bit. And so I kind of not milked, but I had that for about 2 years or so. And then they went out of business because it, bad economy and things weren't selling. And then that was like right around 2013 when, I officially was just like, all right, well, that was my run, and I think just on like the whole, that's, I think more of when it really sunk in, not necessarily with the Forum DC thing. It was more like, I felt very much like like I always say, like a snowboarder doesn't retire from the industry retires the snowboarder. Because if it was up to snowboarders, we would just keep snowboarding every day of our lives and get paid for it, but it's like the industry and the companies at some point are like, no, you're not going to, because you're older and, your name might not be as relevant, or even if like your tricks aren't as big and crazy, which is understandable. So yeah, at that time is when it was like pretty weird, because I had felt like the doors were just like slammed in my face, and your phone stops ringing, your emails stop coming in. And like I always say, the year before, like you're walking onto the red carpet, walking into the premiere that you're in the video of, and then the next year, like you can't even get a ticket to get into the movie theater.
Oh wow.
That was like kind of kind of the way I felt. And I felt like really pushed out of the industry. And I know like now that a lot, that was all basically mental. But that's how I felt, and my wife and me at that time just decided to be like, we were like, at this point, both of us don't have a job and we have some money saved. So let's just go travel for a little bit and kind of just reset in a way. And then when we come back, we'll like face reality, So we went and like, lived in Thailand and Cambodia and Laos and Vietnam and Bali and all these places for like about 6 months. And that whole time I was thinking like, well, should I just like work construction? Should I get into real estate? I was just thinking like, well, the snowboarding world doesn't want me anymore because I'm not a big pro anymore, right? So when I got back, my wife, I mean, she like I owe her everything for this, which is she was like, hey, you can't, like, if you want to, like, we were living in Venice and we were just kind of like partying and hanging out, and I didn't have a job, and I was just doing like, oh, maybe I would commentate here or there, but no, actually, I don't even know if I was at the time. I was just like out of the snowboarding world, and for just like 1 year. And then she was like, you need to go to like a snowboarding event and just see some old friends and just show people you're still around. And there was a snowboarder premiere happening down in San Clemente, and she's like, let's go to that. And I remember we drove down, and I remember getting out of my truck, and I was like walking up to the premiere, and I was so nervous.
Oh, wow.
I was so nervous to go in because I thought everyone was going to be kind of like looking over like, oh, what's he doing here? Like, he's not even a pro anymore. Like, why is he even here? You know, I just felt like kicked out, you know? And when I walked in, I instantly saw like Pat Bridges and a couple of other riders, and like, they all came up and they're like, oh, like, where have you guys been? Good to see you. Like, Eddie, Saudi, and I have goosebumps, but it was like, and it was like a light bulb went off, and I was just like, oh my God, like, this is my family. Like, I spent my entire life with these people and with this industry. And I was like, what am I thinking? Like, I'm not going to go sell real estate. I'm not going to do anything else. Like, I am in this for, I'm in this for the long haul. So that's when I just started literally like, and again, per my wife's suggestion, she's like, go to every event, just show people you're around. And I went to the X Games that year. I got an opportunity to judge the X Games and that season. And then that's when I met up with Nick Hamilton at Transworld. And he was like, literally, he's like, Eddie, you need a job in the industry. Let's figure out a job for you. He's like, I don't even know what it is, but let's figure something out for you at Transworld. And I was just like, yes, let's do this. Like, please. And we did. We like figured out a way to, get me a web series and get me to run their social media. And then that's kind of like started my industry side of things. So
that's really cool, because at the beginning of this podcast, you mentioned how Arbor, I forget the gentleman's name, but he gave you an opportunity, and you said that you were really grateful for him to like believe in you and give you that opportunity. And, there's Kevin Jones who, believes in you and gives you this opportunity. And then I'm only imagining throughout your career, lots of other people as well. But then Nick Hamilton, when you're in this like fragile state of, I mean, it sounds like, and I've heard this from a lot of snowboarders. I heard it in a JP interview one time, like an identity crisis. Like, if I'm not JP, the pro snowboarder on form, then who am I?
Yep.
And it's like, I mean, sometimes even me, like, I'm like, damn, like, I filmed a part this year and stuff. And I always like wonder what that's like to get like stripped of like your credentials almost, you know what I mean? If you get dropped and then you're out for a while, I can only imagine what that feeling would be like, because most things you work at in life, you only get better.
Right.
You know what I mean? If you're a carpenter, over the course of your life, you just get better and better and better at it. And people like your woodwork even more, and your business is booming, and you really have like a lifetime of work. Like snowboarding, it's this like, you're so young and you're in like an illusion if you make it at a young age. And then it's just over at an age where most people at like 25 to 30 aren't able to handle that. They're no longer able to do their craft or their thing that they love more than anything. And if you can still do it, but you can't get anything for it anymore. Right. And you're like, I've dedicated my life to this work. And like you said, it's only when you have that epiphany that you're no longer going to get paid, but there's other ways to get paid in the community. You just can't look at it from the athlete side. And you open those doors and you get goosebumps when you see all your old friends and everybody's opening you with warm arms. I'm like, damn, like that's snowboarding right there. And I feel like a lot of people who get let go from brands run away, stop snowboarding, don't go to premieres anymore because of that exact feeling that you had for 1 year. And maybe they didn't have the wife or the girlfriend or the good friend or the boyfriend to push them to go back into their old family that they think have like left them.
Yep.
But it takes that one premiere to go back, which I'm so excited to get premieres back together, because there's so many people who I feel like can benefit from just that feeling, whether or not you've been a pro your whole life, or just the guy at the hill. Like when you get that community and you get people together that snowboard, and you see the guy that you tried to do a backflip on the hit run and he laughs, he's like, oh, you were Bill, you did the flip and you landed on your head. It's like, dude, we all love this stupid piece of wood. And when you get a snowboard premiere or snowboard event to bring that community together, it's like, I don't know, to me, I've always been like, that's a special thing. And it's bigger than just the pros. It's bigger than just the team managers. It's like, that's the community. The industry is the thing that spits you out and makes you feel like shit. But the community of snowboarding is like what you keep coming back for more.
Yeah. And I think two parts of that, like one, kind of what you were saying about the retirement thing is like, or when you're finished, is like, I compare it sometimes to people who don't snowboard, who I'm explaining it to. Like, I'm like, okay, imagine if your dream is to be a doctor, and then you graduate school with good grades, and then you go to 8 years of medical school and you study your ass off, and then you do your residency, and it's so gnarly. And then you become a super great doctor, and you're like a cardiac surgeon or whatever. And then you do like that for 10 years, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then at 35 years old, the medical industry is like, you can never be a doctor again. And you're like, what? Like, what do you mean? And they're like, you can't do surgery again. You cannot be a doctor. Like, we're stripping you of your license. And you're like, but I've dedicated my entire life to this. This is all I've ever wanted. And I was really good at it. And they're like, doesn't matter, later, you know? That's like what it feels like. It's like super crazy because, again, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm complaining, because I'm like, it was so fortunate, but it's mentally, it's a very weird thing to get to that. Just to have, it's like one day you're this and the next day you're like, no, now you're not. And you can never go back to that. Like, you know, that's the reality. You'll never be a pro snowboarder again, you know? So it's a really interesting thing. Even if you try to prepare yourself, always, you know, Kevin Jones was and even like Peter Line, you know, they would tell me like, hey, this isn't going to last forever. And I knew that. I was very smart. I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be a pro till I'm 50, you know? But like, it's just nothing can really prepare you for what happens. And then also on that, like I was just talking to Dave Marks about this as far as marketing and team, and like, you know, we say like, oh, the industry spits us out, but in a way it doesn't. Like, okay, the way you got to compare it is if I hire someone to like build my house, and I'm like, here's a 2-year contract to build a house for me. And then when he's done building the house and I'm like, okay, thank you, see you later. Like, that contractor is not going to be like, what do you mean, bro? Like, how come you won't let me build another house or your garage, or like, oh, and like get bitter. It's like, it's a contract, and like, you're done the work. See you later. Like,
no hard feelings.
No hard feelings. Like, you gave me something, I gave you something, done. The problem with snowboarding and skating in our industry is like, you sign a 2-year deal with a company and everyone's like, welcome to the family. You know, it's a family. You're going to be part of this family forever. Like it's pretty misleading. And I get it, because it is very community based, especially when you're on a team. Like the Forum guys, like they were like my brothers. Like, we went through everything together, like injuries, like, you know, breaking up with girlfriends, like sad times, good times, happy times, crazy times, drunk times. Like, it was this, you're going through this really wild stage of your life all together doing the same thing. So it does feel like that, but at the end of the day, the company is like, here's a 2-year contract, a 3-year contract, 5-year, whatever it is, do your job. And then when the contract's done, like, that's done. And maybe if you're still killing it, we'll let you build another house. But, you know, if we see that your houses that you're building are falling apart, we're not hiring you. And
a company isn't typically an individual, especially when you're riding for a company as big as Forum. So as you mentioned, that it's like a family and stuff like that. Well, it's a family maybe with your team manager and your filmer and the guys that you're out in the field with, but the company as an entity isn't a single person. So it's like the company is letting you go now. Not unless it's like a, you know, mom and pop branded company, right, where they're like, we're going to keep you around and my name's Bill and I own the company. And you're like, okay, I'll take your word for that. But right, like a company like DC, who's like, we're going to keep you around forever. It's like, well, what does that mean? Who is going to keep me around forever? The shareholders, the guy you're about to hire in a suit to come in and clean up after a 2008 financial crisis? crisis.
Mhm.
Like, you know.
Yeah. So it's pretty interesting. And I think that that's something that, you know, I mean, for me, it was just always, I just always was like, I know someday I'm going to lose my contracts because it's just like that is just the reality. And my whole thing was like, I never want to be bitter, and I never want to be like, hate the industry or hate the companies that I rode for, because I feel like that absolutely happens a lot in our industry. And I'm like, my point of view is, well, you know, they gave me this opportunity to do something that was like unbelievable, and like travel the world and get to snowboard with friends. And I mean, it's crazy. Our job was to just snowboard, you know, that's like unbelievable. So it's pretty wild to me when I understand when pros get bitter, because it is a harsh mental thing to go through. You literally just feel like everything is ripped away from you, um like, and it's easy to just point the blame onto that company and the industry and just say, oh, you chewed me up and spit me out, you know, I hate you. But for me, I was always trying to look at it, even if I left the industry and I did do something else, I would have never hated it. I would have been like I like grateful for the opportunity, you know.
It's like a breakup or a divorce. The more skin you have in the game, it's like a quick breakup. You know, if you have a 1-year contract, it's like a chick you only dated for a year. If you've put in 20 something years of your life into it, and then you have a bad breakup with your brand, it's like a divorce. Like your life gets shifted upside down. If like, you know, there's money owed and stuff like that, like in a lot of cases, I mean, people and like Simone Chamberlain, one of the nicest people I think on the face of the earth.
Yeah.
Like legit, like a good human that's going through life, making other people's lives better. It doesn't matter who you are, what your beliefs are. That guy's just a good human. And he got screwed completely out of so much money from, you know, owed from Nomis and Stepchild and stuff. And I had him on the podcast, and it just shows in his character that he's like, well, I could be mad about all that money forever, but you know, I'm going to let it go. You know, instead he focuses on what you just said. Like, I was the luckiest person in the world to be a pro snowboarder.
Yep.
Instead of like living like jaded day to day like that. I mean, in hindsight, we could all be jaded. We could be like, if only we would have bought Bitcoin that one time our friend was talking about it 10 years ago, we'd all be rich. It's like, you can't live your life like woulda, coulda, shoulda. Like, you, at this point, if you're alive and breathing, you should just be pretty grateful, because life's a pretty cool thing. Brad, do you have any regrets with your career? Is there anything that you wish you navigated differently? Like signing DC, maybe when that offer was there head to toe, or a little bit before?
No, I mean, I kind of think of those things, but like, it wouldn't have mattered with Forum because they went out of business. And with DC, it's like, you know, okay, maybe I would have gotten an extra year or two or something, you know, maybe I could have got paid till I was 35 instead of 33 or whatever. But yeah, not really. Yeah, I mean, you know, maybe I would have taken a few more PAL laps when we were out sledding in the backcountry, because we never got to do that. But it was like, build the jump and hit it. And I'm like, but we can make a couple fun turns over there. No, we don't have time, you know? So.
Oh man, Eddie, if only you could redo your career right now, because it's definitely headed in that direction. I feel like kids now will never, unless you put that pressure on yourself or you ride for a brand that's expecting you to deliver in that sort of context, there's no longer that like, do this or you can't be on do something gnarly or you can't be on the team. I don't even know if there's a team like Forum anymore that's like, you have to be, maybe Burton, kind of like you have to be the best. I don't really think they care about gnarly. It's just that you have to have a certain appeal. Like they don't really care if you go the biggest or whatever. But I mean, in any brand, like right now, I feel like as long as you have a look and you have your little niche, it's like, you don't need to go and hit the big, or you mentioned building big jumps, blocks like that. Even style of snowboarding isn't like, you can still do that, but it's no longer the formula in the backcountry to do that as a rider. Where when I was a kid, I was like, and I got to go sledding my first few years, it's like build the jump and spin and do your best park trick and in 5 tries, hope you land and don't land in your best friend's bomb hole. And then you do, and you land on your neck. And like you said, you're like, this isn't powder and this isn't fun. This is a car crash at a high speed. This sucks.
Yeah.
I get that one a lot. Like, dude, you ride backcountry. It's not that bad. I'm like, buddy, do you see my bails? Like, I spin off of the ground 3 times and my carcass doesn't hit until I land in my buddy's track at the bottom.
Yeah. It's so gnarly. I have like so much respect for backcountry riders. And again, nobody can understand that until you do it. Just like nobody can understand AK lines until you actually ride one, like, or any big line. But like, until you're there at the top and you realize you can't see anything anywhere you're going, and like that one little left wind lip might be 1,000-foot cliff, and the right wind lip is like the one that you want to go off. Like, you don't know until you get to do it, and that's the thing. I think, you know, people, it's easy to judge things when you've never done it, you know.
I'll add to that, and then I'll move on to the next equation. It's or next question here. With rails, I hear a lot of people go like, oh, I would do that trick on that rail. I hear like younger kids say that, and then I'll have been to that rail in Stockholm or in Montreal. I'm like, he doesn't know that there's a garbage can that's out of the frame, that's frozen into the ground. And if you go left on that switchtail 270, you're going to break your leg in half. And like, or the pole on the in run makes you have to move your butt cheeks around or something. Like, it's same with skateboard spots or anything, you know what I mean? It's like, you don't know about that feature until you were actually at that feature and you have all of the information at your disposal, because it's pretty easy. Same with the backcountry jump. People are like, that jump's not that big or whatever. And it's like, I would love to see you strap in up there and listen to the wind blow by your ears while you're standing on top of a step down. And all you see are 3 small snowmobiles at the bottom of a lake. And it looks like you're about to jump off a 500-foot cliff. Like, good luck doing your back 7 Japan you do every day in the park, buddy.
Yeah. Oh my God. I love it. Yeah. You're so spot on. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'll get to my 10 questions here, and these are kind of fast, but one last question for you. What do you think of the current state of snowboarding?
Well, I think I think that it's so different from when I was, you know, from the early 2000s and mid 2000s. Like, for me, it was very, in a way, it was like simple. It was like, here's your one video project, go film as much as you can for, you know, from December till April or May, and then that's that, you know. Whereas now it's just so crazy because there's like 1,000 videos, and there's like, people will only release a video part that's not attached to an actual production company. It'll just be like monster part by, you know, this guy. And then it's social media. It's like convolutes everything. And you have to put out, like, if you did a trick that no one's done, like, you have to put it out that day, not like wait for the video part. You know, it's just so different. And it's hard for me to wrap my head around it. I mean, I just think it would be difficult to be a pro snowboarder these days. And I also, you know, and then kind of like what we were saying, I think now it's just become very, very like niche. You have your rail guys, you have your contest guys who only do contests. You have your only your pipe guys, only your slope style guys, only your big air guys. Then you have only backcountry guys, you know, and it is what it is, you know. And as far as like the quad corks and stuff, you know, I think, you know, I was talking to someone the other day and they were like, well, it was actually Andrew Hauermont who created the Air and Style event a few years ago. I was talking to him and he's like, you know, you can't get in the way of progression. He's like, you can't try to stop progression. And if those kids want to go do quad corks, great. That doesn't mean you can't go ride powder. That doesn't mean you can't just do some pow turns, or it's just like everybody's going to do their own thing. And I mean, yeah, it's cool. It's different, but it is what it is. I'm sure, you know, Craig Kelly would have thought that filming for Forum was a lot different than him growing up, you know, and he would have been like, what are you guys doing? Like, this is crazy, you know? So like, why are you hitting a handrail in the streets? There's powder out there, you know?
Oh man.
So
totally.
I think every generation is different. And, The last thing I'm going to do is be some like older pro snowboarder telling the younger generation like what they should be doing. It's their turn to shape it however they want. And I can give my little old man advice here and there, but I'm not going to try to say what it should or shouldn't be anymore.
I thought that Peter Line did a really good job as being a mentor for the whole Forum crew the entire time, from his early days, the Resistance, until working for Foursquare, and
Yep.
inevitably the end of Forum. But I feel like it seemed like he was pretty relaxed and let people just kind of do their own thing and snowboard the way that they want to. I mean, you filmed with Peter, you're good friends with Peter Line, would you say that's a fair statement about him? Or
absolutely. I mean, I learned so much from Pete. Like, I got his autograph when I was 16 at the 1996 97 US Open. And then I looked up to him my whole life. And then when I got on Forum, it just somehow, like, I think on one of the first trips they were like, oh, Eddie and Pete, you're rooming together. And then like that was that. We just became good friends. And then he was the best man at my wedding. We're like really great friends to this day. And he was a really good mentor. And again, I think he would have almost said the same thing. Like, he was never super judgmental about what people were doing, and he was really good with talking about the end of careers and stuff with me. Like, I remember at one point he was like, oh yeah, I don't know, I'm trying to sign a contract, but they're probably not going to give me that much money. And he's like, well, because he's like, I'm just not as good as I used to be, and the young kids are better than me. And I was like, damn, that's so cool to hear that. Like he for as big of an ego as he could have, I feel like he doesn't really have one. He sees things in a good way, and I agree. I learned a lot. Like, the kids, like, at one point we were those kids who were better than the older guys, and we got the contracts, and now there's someone else taking those away from us. Cool. We had our time, and now it's the next kids. But yeah, Pete's amazing. Yeah.
When Peter came back and filmed that random, I forget which Forum movie, he came in and hit the streets and did like a hard way back 270 onto a giant tube and did a switchback 3 into a wall ride. And when he filmed that part, I was almost like disappointed that Forum didn't make that like more epic. Like, you know what I mean? Like, timeline of his footage, like that, for him to like take a like 5-year hiatus of really like filming A+ clips and then coming back and filming what I would argue were like as good of clips as anyone at that point could film. Like a switchback 3 into that wall was like, there's like the smallest amount of people who have the skill level to do that today. Like, I was like, they should have made that park so like, they could have made it way more epic. Like,
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. And he also, what he did in that too, is he did like, it's right next to that where he switched back to into that wall. It's like, he did a little like, I don't know if you would call it a Miller flip, but it was kind of like a little hand plant front 3 off that little like pole.
Way before people were doing that shit too.
And then that afterwards like went like blew up. Like, everyone was doing those. And it's funny because Pete always said, he was like, I always want to try to have one trick in a part that's like outside the box, that is maybe not necessarily inventing a whole new trick, but just something that is like different and noticeably different. And he was like, I was stoked to sneak that one in there and then see where people took it,
Yeah. Cause there's been like, in a lot of skate videos, they'll do that. The guy will, go do drugs for a long time or screw up their life and then like come back and film the most epic part.
Yeah.
And
Guy Mariano.
Yeah. Great. That perfect example.
Yeah.
Like, my friend Andrew really looked up to him, and he like cried when he first saw that part, because he was just such a big fan, and then he knew his path.
Yeah.
And it was just like, it was a very impactful part. And I just think that Pete's part should have been navigated a little bit more like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. That is a really good point. That was in a Former against him.
Yeah. That was a really special part to me, but I didn't think that at that exact time,
right.
But reflecting on that video part and how big of an impact Pete had on snowboarding. And I think that he's truly one of the greatest personalities to ever be in snowboarding. There's like, he's such an individual, a creative through and through, his snowboarding, his style. I just thought that part deserved a bit more.
Yeah,
Could have had that, but yeah. Anyways,
Yeah.
Okay, so 10 questions for you, boss, and then I'll let you get back to,
Yeah, I
taking Arbor to the
get back to
top.
work.
Yeah, seriously, dude, I'm get you fired. Okay, number one, best style currently and back in the day.
Ooh, dang, can I have like a couple?
Yeah, of course, dude.
I mean, I always loved Peter's style and I always loved Devin's style. And and then
I think. There we go.
all right.
All right,
Yeah,
I can edit that out.
Kevin Jones, and especially when you see him with your own eyes, it's like witnessing the most incredible like his snowboard is just an extension of his body. It's unexplainable. That dude is insane. But and then now I would say dang, it's kind of tough, and it's interesting how style has changed, like like the super floaty don't move style like Devin has, like, is almost changed now. Like I think it's like Rene Rinikongas, how he's like super wild style and he's cruising all around.
Yeah.
That's a little bit more like popular, and I kind of like it. I kind of dig it. It looks like he's all wild, but he knows what he's doing, and I think that's kind of a cool style. But yeah, I guess I'll just say Rene for now.
Cool.
He's just such a positive dude. Yeah.
Sick. Number two, most underrated boarder.
Oh man. I'm gonna go with Chad Otterstrom, which I know he's not underrated, but I think he should be catapulted up into a level of legend that he deserves.
Oh, that's so sick. Yeah. No, continue, please.
Yeah, I'll just say Chad, because again, I mean, he was on forum, he was at big sponsors, and it's not like he was overlooked. But again, I just think that dude has more talent and skill than just about any rider on earth. And I think, and he's still killing it, and he's in his 40s. I mean, he's still absolutely killing it. And I think he just deserves, and he's like a snowboarder. I think every pro looks up to Chad. But I just think he maybe didn't get the commercial recognition as he should have.
He's one of my favorites. That was awesome. Number four, dopest brand.
Now or when?
I mean, maybe one back in the day and now.
No, I mean, I think I'll just say forum. For me, that was like, it was a pretty cool thing, and in a way, it got dissolved, and I think maybe that's almost a good thing, because it was just preserved as this really cool company, and it never got the chance to just get lame. And so, yeah, I'll just say forum.
Sick. Okay, number five, what does your perfect day snowboarding look like?
Now, I mean, absolutely dream day would be heliing in Alaska. I've only got to do that one time, and I've thought about it every single day since. But otherwise, it would just be, maybe a Baldface trip would be right way up there. But essentially, just honestly, a good powder day at Mammoth, and maybe riding with friends or even just alone. I ride powder alone a lot. I just ripping really fast laps and hitting up the whole mountain. So yeah, maybe just powder day at Mammoth as a realistic.
All right, buddy system, Eddie. You gotta stay preserved out there. We can't get your dome hit off a tree, shredding pow solo.
Yeah, I'd never even thought about that, but yeah.
Come on, Eddie. We gotta keep you safe. No, but the Baldface plug was sick. Shout outs to Jeff.
Yeah, huge shout out. Yeah, anybody listening to this who hasn't been to Baldface, save your pennies and get there, because it's the best place on earth.
I agree. Save your pennies, and it's supporting snowboarding. It's like that place is snowboarding. So if you have some extra pennies, save it and go to Baldface. All right, number six, worst thing about snowboarding.
Injuries.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Number seven, best thing about snowboarding.
The feeling you get when you ride away from a hard trick. Nothing beats it.
8, favorite clip you filmed and why?
Two. One of my favorite clips I filmed ever was the backside 270 at the intro of Promo Copy for my first trick in Promo Copy, because at that time I think there was very, very few people doing backside 270s, and that was a 33 stair rail. So to me, that was such a big thing for me. And then the second would probably be the backside 5 with Ken Block hitting the Subaru jump in New Zealand, just because that was kind of weird and crazy and like unique and hasn't ever been done before. So
sick. Okay, career highlight.
I mean, I guess, I don't know. Maybe I was pretty stoked on my Transworld cover. It was a big ledge in Finland that was like a 3-story drop.
The scare, I remember when that cover came out, you're not quite on the ledge yet, you're airing, and it's I remember being like, this is how psycho I have to be a pro. Like, Jesus. I'm so glad you didn't die. Obviously, I mean, you knew you weren't going to die or you wouldn't have done that.
Me too. I'm glad to.
All right, number 10, who is the GOAT?
Oh, I mean, it's hard. You gotta, obviously Craig Kelly is the go-to, but you know, I'm just gonna say this. It's like, to me, it's like Craig Kelly is here, and then the 3 is like, to me, is you know, Peter Line, Terrier, and Jamie Lynn. So
sick. Okay. Shaun White, Mark McMorris, greatest of all time contest rider. Who do you think?
Oh, I mean, I think Shaun's probably, you know, won more golds and stuff. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
I don't know either.
But I do know
or Olympics.
I mean, both of them are amazing, and they're both like, whatever your views are on contests and all that stuff. I mean, they've both pushed snowboarding to an incredible level, and they're both super solid dudes. So yeah, shout out to both of them. But yeah, that's a good point. I don't know. I would think Shaun, because doesn't Shaun have like 2 or 3 gold medals from the Olympics? And like,
Shaun has a lot of medals.
Yeah.
They both do.
Yeah.
They're both really clutch when it comes to the end, and they both like are in last place. And then to be able to just win gold, they're like, buzzer beater boarders. You know what I mean? You can never count those 2 out. And that's why they're one of the greatest.
Yep.
Plural. All right. Thanks for coming on, Eddie. You're the best. I'm a huge fan. It's nice to meet your heroes as a kid, because not all of them exceed your expectation, and we've had some good times, and I'm looking forward to coming down and crushing some pizza and some beer with you and seeing you at a snowboard premiere soon, my man.
Yeah. And Jody, thank you. I appreciate you. And I same goes back to you. Like I said, I look up to you guys, you and the Man Boys, like for what you do in the backcountry. It blows my mind, and much respect.
Word, dude. Thanks again, Eddie. Have a great day.
All right. Later.